Good.
Very good. I call to order today's special council meeting of the Township of Cavan Monaghan on this Thursday, January 21st. I'd ask for approval of today's agenda. Moved by Deputy Mayor Graham and Councillor Huntley. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion is approved. I would ask that any members declare any pecuniary interest at this time or when the situation arises. Seeing none, there is no closed session, so we will move right into our delegations. Our first delegation, item 6.1, is Rob Ross from the Municipal Revitalization and Heritage Advisory Committee, also commonly known as our Mr. Hack. Welcome, Rob. Rob, I can see you are here, but your video's off and your audio, and I'm sure you're working hard to try and get that turned on.
Now, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Very good. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that Robert was up first. We share a laptop. I will go get the gentleman. 2 seconds.
All righty.
Robert. Sorry to keep you waiting, Council.
No problem. Welcome, Rob. That was very close. Glenn almost hijacked your delegation on you.
Well, I won't take too much of your time, Mayor and members of Council, esteemed staff, and thanks for allowing me the opportunity to speak at the special budget meeting. This is about regarding a capital request put forward by the Municipal Revitalization and Heritage Advisory Committee, sometimes known as Mr. Hack. And all of you, I suspect, are familiar with the beautiful mural of the old Millbrook train station that was painted on the side of 22 King Street East, in downtown Millbrook, I think about 10 years ago, maybe a bit less than that. And a number of years ago, when this was being planned and put together, it was a local committee, a committee of citizens that took it upon themselves to take care of this work, and with permission of the building owner, contracted with an artist to do the painting. And over the years, as you may have noticed, the mural has been touched up and the surface has been restored in some ways. But over time and with our weather conditions here in Ontario, the mural has really deteriorated to a level that requires more than just a touch-up. You may know that the mural committee, the Committee of Citizens, is no longer active. However, one of the remaining members is on our committee, on the MRHAC committee. And Mr. Hack is willing to take on responsibility for the mural since we see it as part of our mandate. Public art is an important part of our mandate. Facade composition is one of the things that we're very interested in as a committee. And Section 2 of the Streetscape Design Guidelines for Downtown Millbrook include provisions for both banners and murals. So we see it within our area of responsibility. Some members of the MRHAC have been in touch with the owner of the building to explore possible options to repair and or replace the mural. Our ask at this point is that council considers setting aside $7,000 in the 2021 budget to enable our committee to preserve this, what we're calling an iconic centerpiece, a valuable component of the streetscape in downtown Millbrook. But at this time, we're still researching and reviewing some of our options. So we don't have definitive costs for the budget, or for the project rather. So at some point, hopefully very soon, next year, we will be able to bring forward a detailed breakdown and present it to council. But what we're asking right now is that some funds be set aside for this project. So that in a nutshell is what we're asking, and I would be happy to try and answer questions, or staff will save me if I can't answer the questions. I'm sure Ms. Ayotte or Ms. Alice.
Very good. Okay. Thank you, Rob. Sorry, was there more? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine.
Okay. Do we have questions from members of council on that one? Deputy Mayor Graham.
Thank you. And through you, Chair. Robert, thanks for the delegation. I think we're all familiar with the mural. I guess my question is a kind of a two-part thing based on just how you just answered sort of the end of the presentation there. With the unsurety or surrounding the actual costs involved in the project, and you know, I'm just uber sensitive to this year's budget. You know, well, in comparison to the other two that we've done before it. So I'm just curious if there, you know, I know that the mural has and continues to wear, and that is an issue. I didn't know if there was a specificity to the timeliness of the request. You know, if it's going to take potentially up to a year before we know the costing of the project. You know, I don't think there's any councillor who necessarily objects to doing what is required. I'm just questioning if we need to pre-allocate for this amount now because it's something that absolutely must be done this year versus something that we can consider maybe for next year's budget when, you know, we'll get a little bit of, you know, a little bit understanding and hopefully some more stable ground beneath us and maybe even a bit more clarity with regards to what the project is in fact going to cost. And if that is, you know, if there's any reason to not consider that, I'm open to hearing it, of course.
Okay, I'll try and respond to that, and then staff can jump in if I've got anything wrong. I mean, we have looked at some preliminary costs. One of our members, Peter Ramsey, has looked at possibly digitally photographing the mural and then having that applied to a large, I think aluminum, if I'm not mistaken, board that could be attached to the present, over the present mural, and would be more long lasting. And then there are possibilities of simply repainting and sealing the mural in a better way, although we're not sure about that. One of the factors is also negotiating or working with the property owner, since it is on private property. So in terms of the urgency of the project, I think, you know, it'll just continue to deteriorate over the next year. I think we will be able to move forward fairly soon, I think, in the new year, but I think the staff would be much more qualified to answer that than I am. So that's staff may want to jump in at this point.
Okay, thank you, Rob. I'm looking for staff who all have their video turned off. One of them is just about ready to jump in, I can tell. And Karen is it.
Mayor McFadden, members of council, I'm happy to assist Mr. Ross with answering the question. So the mural has been painted since 2012. Since that time, the mural committee had money to maintain the mural, and it's been touched up and resealed twice. Because of the condition of the brick, that work is not withstanding the weather elements. So now we have a situation where the mural has deteriorated substantially, and there are no more funds with the former mural committee to fix it. So Mr. Ramsey has done a lot of work in terms of presenting some options on what is the best way to move forward. And Ms. Lysek from the committee has contacted the building owner to ensure that they are happy with continuing to host the mural and what options there might be presented for maintaining that mural. So we are looking at having the mural redone on aluminum panels and then reaffixed to the wall. But there will be some costs associated with that in terms of determining are the bricks of a suitable quality that we could actually affix aluminum panels to the wall. So there are a number of factors that we need to continue to research. I think the reason for the ask this year too is that as the mural continues to deteriorate, it makes how we get that digital image maybe a little more problematic. If we can get that digital image done while it's in the best shape possible, then we can continue on with the rest of the work. So it is a significant asset to the downtown and to the community as a whole. So I think some members of the committee feel there's a certain urgency for this year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It was coming right to you, Councillor Huntley. I was going to say, as our committee rep of Mr. Hack, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, I mean, this is kind of a major undertaking for the committee this year. It was kind of set as the committee's priority is to deal with this mural and figure out what to do with it. So what we're really doing is just asking for kind of an upset limit to kind of have a guideline of what's the art of the possible with the funds available. We may not use all that money, hopefully not, but what we really need to do is be able to move forward in some way whatsoever. And that's kind of why the ask is here and why Mr. Ross has come forward today. So that it is the project for the committee this year.
So I guess a question with regards to the funds. So they're being set aside. I recognize we don't know exact costs and everything thus far, but is there going to be potentially decisions made at the Mr. Hack committee to move ahead without council being involved in it? My only concern is it is a significant asset as far as I'm concerned to the downtown. And could those, for example, the funds be used just to simply paint it over and relocate the mural somewhere else, or anything that they're going to move ahead? Are they going to come back to council with?
So
go ahead, Councillor Huntley.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor, I mean, we can, as a committee, we can bring back any decisions that are being made and potentially even the options that we're looking at to council. I don't think that's an unfair ask at all.
Yeah, I think I'd feel a little bit more comfortable with that, and I think it is truly a real asset to the downtown for sure. It certainly draws your attention, and none of us on council want to see it simply deteriorate to the point that it's a detriment. So I recognize that the monies can't be specifically associated to the project thus far, but I don't have an issue with setting the monies aside. Just have the committee come back with our options or whatnot and who knows, there might be a different request for funds at that point, but I guess $7,000 certainly demonstrates council's willingness to move ahead with something down there and that it is important. So I don't know whether any other members of council have any other specific questions, but I would certainly look forward to their options coming back to council at a future date. Any other questions from council or any more input from staff or Mr. Ross? Did anything further to add?
Nothing from me, Ross.
Okay.
If I could just add one thing, Mayor McFadden.
Okay.
In discussions with the building owner, we have the building owner has indicated a willingness to contribute some funds to the rehabilitation of the mural. So that was a good measure that we will have to pursue with other township staff.
Excellent. And I think too, that would come back as part of those options, because I'm certain there's probably some options that he'd be willing to, the building owner would be willing to contribute to, and maybe there might be some options that they're not. So that could be part of that whole discussion and matrix of options that we deal with at a later date.
Yes, that's correct, because we do know with the installation of the aluminum panels that there is a request for a professional mason to have a look, and we would need to assess the quality of the bricks and the mortar between the bricks to make sure that it's capable of handling the installation of the aluminum panels.
Okay, so as the committee puts together those various options, they may very well need to spend some money in order to come up with that list of options. And Ms. Ellis, you just identified one right there. It would be pretty hard and difficult to get a pricing on the aluminum panels if we don't actually have an understanding of whether it's even possible. So I would imagine you're going to have some monies there available for those purposes. And I don't see the need to come back to council to justify the use of those to put together the list of options. I think that would be just to the discretion of the committee.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Councillor Belch?
Through you, Mayor, just as a member of Mr. Hack, I just would like to see the project go through.
Very good. And my apologies, Councillor Belch. You're correct. That was the combination of two committees that now has two councillor reps on it. My apologies. I was only identifying Councillor Huntley.
No
Yes.
worries.
All right, that's half of our council, right there. Okay, so Councillor Huntley, Councillor Belch, you're both in support of it, and I think that's a good compromise to have those options brought back to council for a further discussion at that time before moving ahead with anything, because it is something that's obviously important to all of us. Excellent. All right, then I get a motion then just to receive that delegation. I got Councillor Belch and Councillor Huntley. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion is approved. Our next item is under general business, and it is the purpose of the meeting, and that is Report Finance 2021-01, second draft of the 2021 budget presentation. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Pope.
Thank you, Mayor McFadden. Through you, Mayor, to the rest of council, we do have the second draft budget presentation for easy reading to make sure that we can provide a quick summary and review before diving in for further questions and discussions. I have a slide presentation that we're going to work off of just to go through some of those summaries first. So I'll just wait for a moment for Cindy to bring that up. Okay, so today we actually have two meetings. This is the second draft budget presentation. The meeting during the day is opportunity for staff to come back to council with additional information, any changes that have happened between the first and second draft, and to provide additional opportunity to discuss in further detail about any of the operating or the capital budgets as proposed today. At 6:00 p.m., however, our special budget meeting is open for public comment. Now, although the municipal office is closed to the public, we have been viewing or live streaming all of the council meetings on the YouTube channel. So if anyone is watching and interested in participating this evening at 6:00 p.m., simply just reach out to our clerk, Alana Arthurs. The email is there, or our main line, to make sure that you can participate virtually this evening. We'll be back on to receive public comments and have further discussion about the second draft. Next slide, please. As a quick overview, in this second draft, there is a proposed 3% municipal residential tax rate increase for consideration of council. This does include a 0.7% decrease in the consolidated municipal operating budget. It also includes prioritizing an 85% investment into the asset replacement reserve, which totals $1.7 million. And a new line item, which was not in the first draft that we want to highlight, is $300,000 for infrastructure reserve investment for future decisions that council will have to make in the near future regarding a fire hall, public works operations center, or Millbrook Yard. This is all at the discretion of council and for discussion today as we move along. All proposed capital projects have been submitted by management for further review and consideration of council. And as a reminder, all the 2020 actuals up to and including November 30th are in this report. There are some expenses included up to December 31st for whatever had been submitted and received by the municipality in the time of the printing of this report. However, we are still receiving invoices in the month of January that do relate to 2020, and they are still being processed. So the final budget will actually include all of those expenses because they should be in and posted at that time. Next slide, please. To reiterate from the first draft, every 1% municipal residential tax rate increase equals approximately $95,700 in revenue towards operating and capital budgets. An estimated 1% municipal tax levy increase, if applied to a residential annual tax bill, would be an increase of $6.79 for every 100,000 of MPAC current value assessment. As we're fully aware, most homes are not valued at 100,000, so therefore a more realistic approach would be to say $27.12 for every $400,000 valued home. Next slide, please. This is a budget summary, which is much clearer and obviously included in the package for council, but this is the report that's brought forward annually to show where all the operating and capital expenditures are coming in, where all the different funding is, and the net ask against the municipal tax rate once we've utilized as many of the DC's reserves, grants, and other opportunities that are available to the municipality. This is basically an overall summary, again, with the 3% draft as proposed. Next slide, please. Staff are requesting that council would provide direction on the capital projects as per the priorities in our corporate strategic plan to either confirm the 3% as presented here today or to determine an alternate percentage based on any changes that are made today so that we can bring that forward to the final draft. The proposed 3% municipal tax rate increase would increase $20.29 per 100,000 of current value assessment. Therefore, a 3% municipal tax increase on a $400,000 residential property would be $81.16 of additional municipal taxation over what was experienced last year. Next slide, please. The municipal tax rate, I will speak to this in a little bit more detail in a moment, but as we know, MPAC has basically frozen their valuations. So our valuation for the 2021 year is the same as 2020, and then also adding to it any changes that came on board throughout 2020 that didn't exist prior to. Next slide, please. So in November, the Ontario government announced that they were keeping the 2020 assessment update, that they would stay with the same valuation. It's usually a 4-year phase in. It would have gone from 2016 to 2020 with a new valuation in 2021. However, because of COVID and the pandemic, they have delayed that. We have experienced, however, a 1.6% increase overall that resulted from changes that occurred during 2020. So basically, the additional assessment is expected to generate $142,940 in additional municipal tax revenues for 2021. For the OMPF, we have received an update. For 2021, our allocation is $510,600, which is the equivalent of $142 per household. We have provided a comparison to previous allocations, and just looking at last year we received $502,300, and then I have a couple other years there for comparison purposes. Next slide, please. Tax levy comparison is just giving you a picture of what the increase in the current value assessment on the properties in our township, going from 5.7% increase back in 2017 to only a 1.5% increase, which is primarily because there is not a reassessment this year. Then also there's the comparator towards what's been happening with an increase in our tax rates. You can see back in 2017 and 2018, our increase was 3.5%, then 2.5 in 2019, 2020 3.16, and then in this draft, a proposed 3%. Next slide, please. The operating budget presents a consolidated department net decrease of 0.7%. There have been various pressures on expenditures and changes that have occurred throughout the year, including the pandemic, and staff are adjusting and trying to bring forward a tight and concise budget for the 2021 year, still with many of the pandemic associated costs not necessarily known. So as a reminder, our budgets come forward as estimated. Next slide, please. This is a summary that we'll walk through in a little bit more detail, but just comparing the final approved budget last year to the second draft this year and the variance between the departments. You will note that we have a new position overseeing planning and economic development and the building department. So ECD has been removed from the office of the CAO and placed up with planning. However, everything else stays the same as previously reported, and we'll walk through that in a little bit more detail as we move forward. Next slide, please. The consumer price index rose 0.1%. That's 0.1% in the 12 months to August. Therefore, according to the Statistics Canada, the municipality has indexed the municipal wage grid accordingly, which is included in this budget. The collective wage agreement associated changes are also included in this budget. And then council approved the user fees, the annual user fees on report finance 2020-24 in December. And those are also included in this draft. Next slide, please. As we work through each department, these are quick summaries to give you a quick overview, but of course we can discuss this in further detail with each of the directors for each department. But planning and economic community development departments have an overall decrease of 3.8%, with an increase in estimated revenues, reduced events under economic development, and the allocation of the new executive director position. The building department is funded through the building permit revenues and therefore does not affect the municipal tax rate. However, there is a decrease in the budget, which is primarily attributed to removing a full-time contract position that was initially included and the allocation of the executive director. And the bylaw department has an increase of 14.7%, primarily attributed to grid indexing for wages and benefits. But as you note, 14% sounds high, but it's $1,190 because that department is relatively small financially. Next page, please. Protective Services Fire Department has a consolidated increase of 3.3%, primarily attributed to wages and benefits of the volunteer firefighter complement, an increase in contracted services, dispatch, materials and supplies, and full year of wages for the administrator in lieu of a previously shared position between the fire department and parks and facilities. The Public Works Department has a consolidated increase of 0.4%, which is primarily attributed to reduced solar revenues, reduced equipment maintenance and repairs, increased materials in salt and sand, reduced recoverable revenues, and now the LED street light loan is fully completed in 2020 and does not need to be budgeted for future years. Next slide, please. The Environmental Services Department has an increase of 1.7%, primarily attributed to the extension of the kitchen waste organic program. It was previously funded with grant funding, which is no longer available and therefore fully within the budget. And there is an increase in per stop pickup in the waste collection contract. The Parks and Facilities Department has a decrease of 1.4%, primarily attributed to alternate hours of operation of the facilities and loss of rental revenues, increased cleaning at facilities, increased health and safety training, and an allocation of wages in the supervisor of operations in lieu of the previous manager of parks. Next slide, please. The Office of the CAO has a decrease of 0.7%, primarily attributed to a reduction in HR and contracted services. And the Office of the Clerk has a decrease of 6.4%, primarily attributed to reduced wages and benefits on the records management contract and an increase in corporate insurance premiums. The clerk can speak to this in further detail as we get into discussions. The 39% increase is due to partially an increase in insurance, which was estimated about 20% initially, and then the adding on of additional infrastructure. Next slide, please. The Finance Department and Information Technology has an increase of 3.3%, primarily attributed to the increase in software licensing and IT hardware purchasing. There is grant funding utilized to offset the contract position for the implementation of the financial software and integration amongst all departments. Reduced contracted services as a triannual actuarial is completed in 2020. An increase to the corporate retiree administered benefits, reduction in penalty and interest revenues, and a reduction in postage as a result of enhanced online options. The council budget has an increase of 0.2%, primarily attributed to grid indexing and increases in associated benefit premiums. And the police contract and services has not yet been confirmed, however, estimated with the 3.3% increase. Next slide, please. The library budget has a consolidated increase of 0.3%. However, if looking at each individual section, because the library doesn't report their capital within the municipal capital, and it is a levy, we do have to look at these components individually. So therefore, the operating levy increase request is 8.3% over last year at their current year ask of $292,033. The net capital levy request is $31,761. And then allocated expenses from audit fees, insurance premiums, payroll, and IT fees continue to be paid directly by the municipality on their behalf. The library will be the first department up to speak further. There was some further clarification provided in regards to carry forwards and rollovers, and so the CEO can speak to those particular changes in her summary sheet of the capital department. The Conservation Authority's budget has an estimated consolidated increase of 9.1%. And not all the 2021 levy requests have yet been received, so therefore that's an estimate. And the Committees of Council budget has a reduction of 10,000, primarily attributed to the following budget requests. Mr. Hack Committee has rolled over 13,500 from the 2020 Heritage Bylaw contract position and 1,400 in landscaping not utilized in 2019. And they've also requested planter boxes and awards. I know Mr. Hack has presented, but that is capital and that'll be forthcoming here as we move forward. Next slide, please. The environmental budget indicates a total levy increase of $71,003 for the operating costs within each ward. The kitchen waste program, the landfill monitoring expense, and shared expenditures at the transfer station. This would equal an environmental tax rate increase of $4.96 per 100,000 of current value assessment. Therefore, looking at a $400,000 assessment, the actual environmental tax rate increase would be $19.84. Next slide, please. The Water and Wastewater Department. The Water and Wastewater Department is managed through the Public Works under the management of the Director of Public Works. And as each municipal department has adapted to grow in capacity and volume of work, and the various changes to guidelines and legislation, it has increased significantly across all departments. Historically, the water and wastewater workload was managed internally between three departments, the building, finance, and public works departments. By allocating percentages from 5 full-time positions, not within water wastewater, which were combined to represent 0.85 of one full-time equivalent staff member. That is expected to need to go up to 100% of a full-time equivalent staff member, which there is a current job description under review as a water and wastewater technician position. The director will speak to this in more detail. However, I'd like to provide the summary here for you. This is to ensure that we can maintain compliance under the Safe Water Drinking Act, all other provincial guidelines and requirements, and continue with the water and wastewater roles and responsibilities that have been done by other staff in the past. The 0.85% allocation has been reduced in this budget to 0.65 and are estimated to be decreased again to 0.4% equivalency or less by the time we hit the 2022 budget. Staff had carried out these responsibilities historically. However, a new position has been incorporated in the second draft budget, and the director is prepared to answer any questions you might have. Next slide, please. The 2021 capital budget contains estimated $7,312,671 of total capital expenditures, including the 2020 rollovers. This includes $3,512,004 of capital requests funded through the municipal tax levy, with the remaining funding provided by reserves, grants, or other funding. Staff are requesting that council review and identify if all projects may remain or be reduced to indicate whether or not we would stay with the proposed 3% residential tax rate increase or amend and adjust the tax levy increase. Next slide, please. This is a summary of the various departments. We'll touch on them, but again, we can go back in more detail with each management here to answer questions. The Millbrook Dam, as a reminder, this is the final payment of $194,078 to be completed in the year 6, which is that additional year mentioned before, added on when it went a little bit over budget than what they originally had anticipated with the grant. Under finance, we have the asset management policy and reporting guidelines under OREG 588. That remains as is from the last budget. The asset management reserve has been adjusted to 85% of 29 depreciation, which is just over $1.7 million. The development charge study update has been amended. We received an updated quote with a reduced cost. The last budget, it was included at $30,000. It's been reduced to $18,000. And this is the new line for the infrastructure reserve. There has been no direction of council to place the funds here. This is a suggestion or recommendation from staff to ensure some funds are set aside. However, this is for council's consideration and direction. IT is presented as previously. As you remember at the last meeting, we did receive pre-approval to move forward with the financial management software integration and training, and that has now been pre-approved. And we've begun working on the timeline and the schedule, which is anticipated to be approximately 18 months in length to ensure that we can have everything in place. MNP brought forward a report this past Monday to council providing some recommendations. These have been included, but as a point, we want to make sure the council knows that these are recommendations from MNP. There are ongoing discussions with the County of Peterborough, and some of these costs may be mitigated. Therefore, although they've recommended $16,000 for IT policy handbook development and procurement, we are working with the County of Peterborough, and we may not require all those funds. And to test and validate the security posture, another MNP recommendation that really can't be done until all these server upgrades are in place. So we've deferred that to next year for pre-approval. Again, some of those costs are unknown at this time, and therefore we've only included $16,000 in the IT budget for purchase this year to see that we can go forward with those projects and come back to council to let you know if we need more. Network server switches and IT infrastructure remain the same with the same $30,000 rollover from the previous year as identified in the first draft. Next page, please. The clerk's department has the ward boundary review. This is a pre-approval, $50,000. If any funds are spent in the 2020 year, the rollover portion is what will be reflected here in the final report. Planning, billing, and ECD. We have the corporate strategic plan update, the various requests from Mr. Hack, and this is where you'll also see the downtown mural of $7,000 from the delegation earlier. We also have the service modernization review recommendation of the additional $25,000, and I know that Bridget Ayat is prepared to speak to that. Again, that is following up from the report this past Monday. There's an employment lands marketing materials, Mount Pleasant Women Institute renovations, Baxter Creek floodplain official plan, GMS watershed plan, and then of course the carry forward of the MMP grant application that's pending. We're waiting the second round to publish so that we can submit an application. We will only go forward with the funds that are approved. So if we are able to submit for $80,000 and receive 80, we will go forward with 80. However, if we are able to submit and they only approve a lesser amount of, for example, 20,000, then we would only go forward with the works that were approved under the 20,000. So therefore, there's a zero net cost on the municipal tax rate for that purpose. Next slide, please. Protective services, as per the previous reports to council on the design of the various infrastructure components coming up, we do have that $118,652 included with the $84,000 rollover, showing you just the adjusted total of $34,652 that needs to be levied through this year's tax rate. We also have a number of transfer to specific reserves. This also matches to the vehicle report that was brought forward to council for remaining funds required to make purchases, and therefore those numbers have all been updated. The other requested 2 purchases on here is bunker gear and fire hoses. The rest are all transfers to reserves, and the fire chief will be available to speak to those as well. Next page, please. Parks and facilities. We do have a number of items here. The community center FF&E will be rolled forward as per end of year. At this time, this is an estimate. We do have the municipal office renovation design. So far, 20,000 has been spent, so we're just rolling over the net 380 at this time. There may be more information coming forward for the next draft. Municipal office furniture, fixtures, and equipment of 100,000. Bruce Johnson AC replacement, recreational land plan and design at CMCC, Millbrook Arena renovation from the ICIP grant that we're still waiting for the outcome of our application. The glycol removal of 18,000, OMS rehabilitation, again, the other grant that we're still awaiting an answer back from. Therefore, that's just a carry forward from a previous year. Parks and Rec master plan update and the 2004 lawnmower. Next slide, please. Roads and Environmental Services has a number of lines, and they are available and here today with the map as well for council's consideration and further discussion. Most of the items are the same as before. There have been updates again to the vehicles as per the report that was brought forward to council. And again, the ICIP grants that are outstanding, we're just pending and waiting approval for that. And as you remember, the International Tandem and Rubber Tire Excavator were pre-approved in the first draft, and they're marked as pre-approved there as well. Next page, please. This is just a summary of the pre-approval. So the first two items were pre-approved in the last budget presentation to council at first draft. Also, there was an additional report subsequent to that, Fire Report 2021-02, and that was also pre-approved by council and included within this draft. Next page, please. Future capital infrastructure renovations and replacements. Council had directed staff on December 20th to provide a plan for financing options for the construction of a new fire station, Public Works Operations Center, and Millbrook Depot. In addition, council has also approved Greenview's proposal on January 18th as a single source. The intent is that the proposal would be completed within the next 6 months. Senior staff will report back to council with the total cost of the proposed projects in conjunction with the Director of Finance to provide council with internal and external lending options, including potential reserve transfers and grant funding, if available, to invest in new capital infrastructure projects once the financial details and construction timelines have been provided. Currently, the municipality has allocated in reserves approximately $1.6 million for the Fire Hall Infrastructure Reserve. As a reminder, in this second draft report, there is an additional $300,000 transfer to an infrastructure reserve to support future projects for your review and discussion today. Next slide, please. As we currently have 3 long debentures through our Millbrook Water and Wastewater Capital Infrastructure Project, we are using approximately 17.6% of what's called the annual repayment limit approved for Cavan Monaghan. Therefore, the remaining available debt capacity can permit potential additional debentures between 22 and 36 million, and that is dependent upon the terms, whether they be between 10 and 20-year terms. As a reminder, staff will bring back information to council about the infrastructure projects once the costs are known, and we will provide to you at that time financing options, both internal and external, for your consideration. This information is just being provided to let you know that there is available room in our annual repayment limit and that we are currently using 17.6% at this time. Next slide, please. Orca, this is just a summary again of the final $194,078, year 6 of the total contribution that Cavan Monaghan has paid of over $1.2 million as the benefiting municipality towards the reconstruction of the Millbrook Dam. 90% of their cost was to be provided was provided by the grant. 2/3 was provided by the grant, and then Orca levied the remaining portion with 90% paid by the local municipality, which is us. Next slide, please. These are the ICIP applications I've referred to a couple of times that are rolled over in the 2021 budget. We're awaiting the outcome of our applications. That's why they must remain. They were approved last year, and we're making sure that they're kept in front of council. When they are canceled, we will let you know, or if approved, we will let you know whether or not we're able to go forward or if these projects cease to exist. Next slide, please. The 2020 Municipal Modernization Plan. This was the first intake. We applied for $90,000, received only $25,000, therefore went ahead with our $25,000, and that is the resulting MNP report that council received on Monday. We are awaiting the second application intake. That's the reference I made earlier about the $80,000. We will only spend again what we receive back. And the second round that was circulated, the information that was circulated about second round was that it would be a follow through to see if the funds were used in first round and whether or not we would be following any of the recommendations in those reports. Next slide, please. This is the second intake after the January 18th approval of the report that was brought forward and the $80,000. Next slide, please. This is a reminder of the successful phases that the municipality has gone through to remove the OLG revenues from the operating and capital budgets. As a reminder, it was completed in 2013 to remove any of the OLG revenues from the operating budget. In 2015, we removed all the OLG revenues from contributing to the capital purchases. And in phase 3, we continue to go through the process to remove any funding for asset replacement reserves from the OLG. If we go to the next slide, there's a bit of a summary there. Shows the investment now. We no longer use OLG funds. These are investments coming through the municipal tax levy. So in 2021, we have 85% of the investment proposed to be funded by the municipal tax levy. Next slide, please. This is the water and wastewater capital request. I know that council will be having more detailed discussions about the draft and the report coming forward from Watson and Associates regarding our water and wastewater rates. However, this is the actual capital specific to water and wastewater. It remains the same as what you received in the first draft. Next slide, please. And therefore, this is the end of the summary of the report. Much more detailed information, of course, is attached. However, we're just recommending that council either A, approve the proposed 3% municipal residential tax rate increase if all operating and capital expenditures were to remain. If there are changes today, we will amend and bring forward the amended municipal residential tax rate increase for council's consideration. Mayor? Sorry, Mayor, I think you're on mute. Thank you. I just wanted to mention as well, as we move forward the departments, I know we're going to go from capital operating, but if we could invite the library to discuss first, that way they can come in and leave it accordingly before we start into the rest of the municipal departments.
Very well said. Great suggestion. Is the library present?
I'm present. I hope Carla is as well. She not? Oh,
There she is.
There
Yep.
she is. Okay. I don't know if you can see me or not.
We cannot.
Oh, well, that's probably a good thing. I'm not quite sure why that is. I've always been on the picture before, but I'm not quite sure how to rectify that. So if you don't mind not seeing my puss, that's probably just as well.
All right, floor is yours, Glenn. And
somebody's just put something up here. The host has said that I can start the video. So unfortunately, you have to look at me. Okay.
Okay, we see you, Glenn.
Okay, I don't know if we're doing a split screen on this or not. Kimberly, Cindy, you have our slides, but are they coming up?
I'm thinking they're working on them.
Oh, is that what that's what that window came up as? Okay, while we're waiting for that, there is, as you've already seen, not much of a change from our first budget proposal. We have decreased our operating request by $1,400. That is an OMERS contribution. One of our staff, we have to put in the budget, but one of our staff routinely elects not to take OMERS. So 1,400 is now deleted from our ask. And oh, we're still waiting for that, but I know our request is rather high this year. The board really wrestled with this, and the board is absolutely adamant that we should get our staff onto the library grid, just as a matter of justice, and to try to maintain in some way pay equity. But here it's come up. Here it's come up, and so as I've said, there are no changes from our first presentation except the reduction of $1,400 because of OMERS. I don't know how you want us to structure this, Mr. Mayor and Council.
As you've said, you haven't really changed much in your budget, so I can, unless Carla, if you have anything specific to say, otherwise I can just open it up for questions.
The only other thing is that I've created a chart for our capital requests that mimics what Kimberly does for the township ones, showing where we are pulling the information. And I assume you have had a chance to look at the ICIP grant information. Otherwise, we're ready for questions.
Okay. All right. Do we want to open it up for questions then? Councillor Huntley? Or that was a wave. Sorry, that was a wave. Deputy Mayor Graham.
Sure. Thanks, Mayor. I have a few questions. Obviously, you know, it's been a tough year, and I was just looking for a bit of clarity with regards to sort of the library's experience throughout the year, if I could. So how has, I guess, the COVID, you know, experience impacted the library? Like, I'm assuming there was a period of closure and then maybe some adjusted feasibility, but when I look at the revenues, I can see that there's obviously been decreases in the programming revenue and user fee revenue. So I was just wondering if you could speak to the sort of the COVID experience and maybe provide an understanding as to, you know, with regards to the dates or closures or anything, if you can provide sort of an understanding, that would be appreciated.
Yes, absolutely, Matthew, and that's a very good question. Of course, it's been a difficult year for all of us. We did report on these dates in the first budget round, but of course, that's rather some time ago. Carla can speak to them. The board and management worked very closely together. We had Zoom board meetings every 2 weeks during the initial closure, the initial lockdown. And Kathy, I know, reports back regularly to you. You've seen our minutes where we reported what we were doing and how our staff were occupied. The board was, as I said, worked very closely with Carla and Aaron, the management, to make sure that keeping our staff on payroll was justified. And because I know that in March 27th, the Assistant Deputy Mayor, Deputy Minister, sorry, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Minister Kevin Finnerty communicated with all public libraries that the libraries would be closed to the public, but our Southern Ontario Library Services and Ontario Library Services North gave us their opinion that staff could still work in branches or work from home. And in fact, that's what they recommended. They recommended that they still continue to work. There would be work for them. And that certainly was our experience. So if you want more details on dates, Deputy Mayor, Carla will be able to give those to you. She has them with her.
So on March, leading up to March 13th and the declaration of the pandemic, libraries were hearing that places were closing. So I was able to get word out to our users that this was imminent. And so we were able to have a big day on Saturday, March 14th. We had 800 transactions happen, which is about 2/3 of what we would normally do in an entire month on one day. So that was crazy in the libraries. But on March 17th, the libraries were declared closed in the emergency orders. The board met that night, and originally we were going to have staff come in and work in the libraries that were closed, but we were thinking that if we were deemed a non-essential service, it didn't make sense having our staff on the roads coming to the library. So we made the decision to work from home. Staff did a combination of online training as well as Zoom meetings, filling their time. We had staff who did cataloging training because there's a new format called RDA that is replacing AACR2R rules for cataloging. And so it was a great time for some of them to brush up on that. We did product-specific training with e-resources that we have for the public. During the time that the doors were actually closed to the public, I was revising the website constantly. I negotiated contracts with some of the streaming services, which I don't know, stroke of luck that I had requested the funds for those for our 2020 budget. And so we were able to put those into service quite quickly. Not as much training on those for the rollout as we would have liked, because normally they do a lead time, but we didn't have it. I just pushed them out. About mid-April, when, as Glenn said, SOLS came out after we received information from the Southern Ontario Library Service that we could work inside the locked libraries, staff started to come in to work on jobs like weeding. You cannot weed the collection from home, but staff came in and started working on weeding and cleaning projects. We also had to look at social distancing and physical distancing in the space and what needed to be done. So we had a lot of rearranging that happened. On May 21st, we were included in the announcement the week before that libraries could open for curbside pickup. So we were right ready for May 21st and had cabinets outside. We continued with that till August 18th. And then we pivoted again and had indoor or in-person visits. During that time, we were also continuing with at least daily activities for the public on Facebook, either posts or Facebook Live story times. We had a French story time on Saturday mornings that were very well received. We created take-home kits for kids that were picked up over the summer, as well as outdoor programming, so that we were not in contravention of any of the emergency orders. Numbers were kept well in check. Staff are kept busy. We did mandatory, or we all got our WHMIS certificates. We also did COVID-specific health and safety training. Because we were very concerned about the patrons that would be coming back to the library, all the emotions and such. And one of my colleagues in the library world said that we'd be dealing with wounded people. So all staff took mandatory training from the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety on dealing with difficult people. So that's just a very brief summary of what staff were doing from March through till now.
Thank you, Carla. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, so I think that I'm glad you provided some clarity on that, because it's obviously not something that comes through in the finance summary of that. So that's hence my question. I think the thing that, I understand there's been lots of discussion about, I don't know whether it's pay equity or on various grids or things of the like, but the thing that I'm really trying to struggle to understand is, you know, from the timing that, you know, the dates that you provided, I have that at, you know, in and around the 22, 23, let's just say 22 weeks out of 52 weeks. So that's about just in excess of 40% of the year. And, you know, I'm just, when I then compare that information with the salaries and benefits expenses, you know, I just confirmed it with payroll because I had assumed there must have been something out of whack, because it turns out that there was actually an additional 280 hours or thereabouts of more hours than was forecast. So with the facilities closed to the public or available only for curbside, I just am having a hard time sort of reconciling the amount of salaries and hours paid up, that there wasn't even a remote, not only was there not a reduction in part-time hours, there was an increase in part-time hours despite that reality. And I understand that at least for a time, especially during the closure, I mean, training and certain of the things that, you know, I think there's definitely a few things that you've listed that are, you know, viable enterprises, but I have a hard time understanding how there can still be an increase in hours when the closure lasts for that long. And I'm very much struggling to reconcile that, but you've given me a few insights. I'm having a hard time getting my mind around it from a number standpoint, but thank you for your explanation.
Well,
Go ahead, Carla.
can I add two things to that? Number one, I had miscalculated on the wages for 2020 in the fact that there are 27 full pay periods. And so the estimates that we had brought forward were for 26 in 2020. So that's one area. Secondly, we received more grant funds, the Summer Experience Program, as well as the Canada Summer Jobs Grant. And so we were able to keep our summer employees on through until December 31st, so that they were able to help offset staff, because based on best practices, we have been cohorting staff. So while we weren't going into the buildings, or we weren't doing as much in the buildings from March until May 21st, since May 21st, some of my part-time people have been getting a few extra hours because of the fact that I've had to cohort. Staff like me would normally work half the day at the Bruce Johnston branch and then half the day at Millbrook. Best practices say that staff should be cohorted, not overlapping and shared between facilities in case there is an outbreak. So that has increased the staffing a little bit.
Okay, I understand cohorting, I understand that. I'm just, you know, when I compare it to the other municipal departments, you know, in light of the increase that's now being sought, in light of the fiscal pressures that we're all under, I just, you know, I know from a municipal standpoint, you know, and I know, like you said, there's some nuances to the library experience and employment, et cetera. But I mean, you know, we had to lay off 4 people, unfortunately, as a municipality due to the, you know, closures of certain recreational developments. So, you know, those were tough decisions, but luckily there was a federal grant program in the form of SERB that was able to offset, and in some cases actually increase the income for those individuals who participated. And I'm sure that might have been the case for individuals that are of the 7 part-time staff or 2 students that you provided in. So I'm having a hard time sort of just reconciling the amount of hours, keeping them on and not laying people off. That's one portion of it. But the fact that the full, you know, business as usual for both libraries from an hour standpoint could be exceeded in light of a 40%, you know, reduction in actual services to be accessible from the public is a hard thing to reconcile. And then combine that with, you know, the substantial increase being sought after this year in light of those financial pressures. I mean, to me, at best, I feel like it's a bit out of touch. But I appreciate your explanation. It definitely provides me with some insights for sure.
Very good. Any other questions from members of council? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Carla and Glenn. And we will move along.
Thank you.
Okay, looking at staff, let's take a quick 5 minute before we start into this. I know Mr. Connolly is all ready to go, riled up here, and we're going to pause for 5 minutes here while we take a quick break. All right, everybody. I see we got Councillor Belch already. Who will await? We got Deputy Mayor Graham. We got our clerk and we got Councillor Huntley. Okay. Everybody all ready to go? Thumbs up. Perfect. Okay, our next item is capital reviews with management by department. And the first up is going to be planning and ECD.
How are you, Worship?
Welcome, Mr. Conley.
Are you you're going to have questions, or would you like me to present it, or how would you like to handle it?
Yeah, there we go. We have it on the screen. Excellent. We've been through the list. Sorry, planning and ECD. So we're going to start. Is that just the ECD, and then we'll go to planning? Then is that how we've got it set up? Yes. Okay. All right. So we're going to start with the economic and community development component of it. Members of council, do you have any questions specific to the items under economic and community development? Deputy Mayor Graham.
Through you, Mayor. One of the things that I believe it's under this category, and if it's not, you just stop me. But I'm not sure, because of the delay with the GMS, I would be suspect that the employment lands marketing material allotment of 5,000 would be necessary. I just don't think it's going to be ready to go by this year. So as some low hanging fruit, I was going to recommend that we remove that 5,000 from that specific category. And then I guess the only other one that we were going to discuss is, if there's consensus of council that the mural should stay for now, I'm not sure it's going to deteriorate so much this year. And that was all I was thinking, is that maybe there isn't the need to put away for it this year. I understand it's priority. Everyone, I think, is a consensus of everyone that it's a priority and should be done. If I'm going to have to put away $7,000 before knowing that much about it, I'm just not sure if it's going to be that critical that it be in this budget year that occurs, given all of the constraints that we're under. So that's the only two things that I thought were warranted discussion at this point, but I'm happy to discuss or debate anything.
Okay, very good. Somewhat confused. We just moved the screen around quite a bit. Did we put up a new screen, or is this back to the same as what we had?
I think
Your Worship, what you're seeing is the original attachment to the council report. So I'm really not trying to move numbers around.
I thought this two screen thing was awesome until all of a sudden two screens become one screen and then two screens. And I'm trying to follow a bouncing ball. Okay, so we've got the planning, building, and ECD. It has changed. Actually, yeah, it has changed. It's now all of them together. Okay, first one only was ECD. Thank you for screen operator, whoever just changed our screen. That's good. Okay, do we have questions specific to that? Matthew, you raised $7,000. That'll be up to council if you want further discussion on that one. And I just want to follow along. Where was the other one? It was in the same. Sorry, 5,000 is below. Right, two below it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Two below it, that one. So I guess I get first, Mr. Connolly, for the employment lands marketing materials. Maybe an explanation just exactly what that was going to encompass, and in light of potential delays, maybe that is something that we could delay for another year, or is it something we were planning on jumping on right away?
Well, it was, through your worship, to the rest of the council, that was identified as part of the original work when council last May had identified that we had approved the growth management strategy. Since then, we've had to update it because the province has changed the growth management plan through Amendment 1 to include another 10 years. Part of that was related to the work that would be implementation of that strategy and looking at lands that we would be identifying. So part of that would be dollars spent to implement that growth management strategy. We still expect that growth management strategy to be delivered at some point this year, probably by the first half or maybe into the third quarter. That said, I really am at your, it's at the pleasure of council whether or not they feel that that's a necessary item, or if that's something could be held over, or something brought back later on.
Okay, very good. I could be convinced either way. If there's something urgent that comes forward later in the year, we could certainly bring it back at that point. But I don't know, to the rest of the council, is it something that's you're interested in pulling off, to Deputy Mayor Graham's point?
I vote yay.
Okay, all right.
I don't know.
Madam
I
Clerk.
have no vote.
Madam Clerk, or to Ms. Pope, do you prefer us at this stage of our budget, one-off motions to have things pulled out? Do you want the ideas captured and read back to us at the end for one motion at the end? We've got a pretty agreeable council today. I'm sure we could be convinced one way or the other.
Through you, Mayor, to Council, Finance will be pleased to see a motion, whether or not it is in one combined motion or separate motions. I'll leave that decision up to the clerk.
Madam Clerk.
I think it might be easier if we do individual motions, and then we're rest assured we don't miss anything at the end.
All right, we have consensus. Okay, we have a mover from Deputy Mayor Graham on the the removal of employment lands marketing materials for $5,000 off the capital budget. Do I have a seconder? Me. Okay, so we have a seconder. Now we will call for recorded vote. Unless there's discussion. Any discussion on it? No. Okay, Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Huntley,
No.
Councillor Belch,
Can't hear you, Tim. No.
Unmute. There we go. So can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay. No.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion is completely lost. Okay, so that one is staying in the budget.
Well, I was going to say the amount of money doesn't really make it any difference, like overall to the budget. I don't think it does.
I'm willing to count every nickel until we get below 3%. So it doesn't
Well,
happen by accident.
I'm
Aren't
thinking,
we at that?
so we need something to get below it then. All right, thank you, Deputy Mayor Graham, for identifying low-bearing fruit. Now your next item is the $7,000 for the Mr. Hack downtown mural. Are you going to move that one?
Sure.
I'm not seconding it. Do we have a seconder?
9.
Okay. All right, that one died too. Okay, so 2 for 2. Any
Are
other
we
low
picking
bear-
that up or are we just?
If we're leaving it in. Okay, so any other low-lying fruit in this section of the budget? I'm sure Mr. Connolly was looking for more discussion on these. Councillor Huntley.
Through you, Chair, the Baxter Creek floodplain assessment special study area. I thought we were moving that into an operational type fund versus a capital, because isn't that not work that they are anticipating potentially if the Baxter Creek floodplain special or floodplain thing comes back and it isn't as it is encompassing as expected? Like that's kind of a crapshoot too, is it not, that one, Mr. Connolly?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Huntley and the rest of Council. That is something, again, we have the mapping itself. It's being peer reviewed, and based on the results of that mapping, we've identified that the dollars there, that if we have to do work, if it's required, that it be done that way. And that would be something that we would outsource in terms of having someone to take a look at that. Again, it's something that if we had by budget and we get an answer in the next little while, it's something we may remove because of that, but we're not sure yet as to whether it will or will not be required. So prudently trying to include that right now.
So through you then, Chair, I guess to Deputy Mayor's point, I mean, if we knock that down to 10,000 instead of 15,000, we've knocked a couple nickels off of it. And if your estimate comes in higher than 10,000, then you could potentially come back to look for the difference.
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Huntley, I'm not quite following what you're asking. We've identified 5 with the notion that we don't think it would be more than that. We certainly wouldn't put in a number with the idea that it's going to get higher. What we're doing is waiting for the results to see whether or not this would be required. If it was, it would be up to a limit of about 5,000. Our hope is that if there isn't much that needs to be done, it would be under 5. And if no work is required, then it wouldn't be 5,000. It would be a saving as well. We wouldn't spend any of the dollars if not required.
Excellent. I think you just took $10,000 out of the budget then.
I think the number he's referring to is 15,000, Mr. Connolly, sorry.
The one I was looking at was the $5,000. The $15,000 is, my apologies, the special study area. Again, I was looking at the 5, but I meant the 15. The 15 is the dollar figure I'm looking at again. My same explanation, just a different dollar figure. I apologize. I was looking at the one above that. I feel like I'm playing Hollywood Squares and moving the money around. I do apologize, but again, the same thing, the same explanation is there.
Okay.
Just the dollar figure was off by me. I apologize.
So I guess then what's your level of confidence in the 15,000 versus the 10,000?
So we have gone through this back and forth, and when we identified originally the budget, and also through the discussions we had through the first draft of the budget, again, talking to Karen Ellis, who, the director of planning, if she wishes to weigh in with some more details, we feel that that's a number we're comfortable with. Again, it would be one of those things that we wouldn't go above that. Our hope is that if we have to do anything, it certainly wouldn't go above that. But we don't have enough information right now for me to have said it could be taken off or to refine that number lower. So again, just being prudent and being in the area planning, that's what we're looking for right now. So if for somewhere between now and February 16th, if we get a further revision, we could change that. But as it stands right now, that's what we're confident in.
Okay.
Unless Miss Ellis has something else to add to it.
Ms. Ellis?
If I could jump in, Mr. Mayor. We are looking to staff at Orca. They're following up with the Ministry of Natural Resources because they are the ministry responsible for the special floodplain policies. So we are waiting for direction from that ministry in terms of what the extent of the work that will be required, which will then impact the anticipated price. So to be quite honest, the $15,000 is a bit of a
Placeholder?
It's a placeholder, yes. Yes,
Okay.
we're hoping that with the technical details and the information that was generated as part of the new floodplain mapping, that the work required can be mostly done in-house, but we really don't have any idea at this point.
Okay.
Mayor,
Bell.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yes,
Go ahead.
thank you. I recall that there was another study that was up for discussion, and that was a Jackson Creek study. Karen, what's happened to that?
Through you, Mayor McFadden, to members of council. So the Jackson Creek floodplain study has been completed as well. It is also being peer reviewed. The information I've received from the Conservation Authority is that the floodplain for Jackson Creek that is in the portion in Cavan-Monaghan Township does not really affect development potential that much. And so we are expecting significant changes. Having said that, there are significant changes in the city of Peterborough in terms of the Jackson Creek floodplain. So
Right.
it is also being peer reviewed, and you should see that in 2021.
Okay. So we didn't have to add any monies to that Jackson Creek floodplain situation?
Through you, Mayor McFadden, to members of council, no, because we paid for our portion of the study in previous budgets, and there is no special policy area for Jackson Creek because it's not considered a built-up area. And so under provincial policy and then translated through our own planning documents, you can't build in a floodplain. There's a special policy framework for historic downtowns under the provincial framework that will recognize existing development and will permit redevelopment in those historic downtowns, provided certain conditions are satisfied. But to be able to do that, those lands have to be part of the special policy area.
Okay, thank you.
So if you remember, this is where we got into the whole discussion about the mill and being able to use it for public occupancy. Because it's not within the special policy area right now, we can't use it. With the new floodplain mapping, and if we adjust the boundaries and go through that exercise, that would be one of the areas that we're going to look at.
Interesting. Any other questions from members of council? I don't see any. I think Mr. Connolly and Ms. Ellis, that is it for planning and ECD.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Council.
Oh, I guess that's not all because we now have building and That would be Mr. Conley again.
Yes.
Okay. Questions from members of council on, who was already in there? Is there another page, or that's the very bottom of it? That's it?
That's it.
Okay, and is
There is no
bylaw,
building.
is bylaw included in that? Is there any bylaw capital? Sorry, I'm just going through my list.
Through you, Mayor, I don't think there's any capital on building or bylaw.
All right, moving right along. Fire protective services. I don't know if there's any capital in fire and protective services. Is there, Chief? Like a new fire hall?
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor. Absolutely. And I appreciate council's support the other day with the design.
Yeah, there's pretty much bunker gear, which is essential, and fire hoses. There you go.
Has anything changed, Chief, since the last meeting with regards to your capital request, sir?
Absolutely. Through the mayor to council, the truck requests were adjusted. In some cases, for an example, your tanker one, I think my first ask was 225. It's now down to 68, 126 because of the exercise that we went through with the fleet vehicle report, and those adjustments have been made and are before council for consideration today.
Okay, and just for a reminder, because I know rather than setting aside all the monies this year, knowing we couldn't purchase them, we divided them out. So I recall, did we do that also for the 2003 Chevy, the 1989 Chev, and the 2000 Ford, if I recall?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all right. Any other questions from members of council with any of those specific items under protective services? Councillor Huntley.
Through you, Chair, not so much a question, just a comment. And I'm glad that we went through that fleet exercise, because now we definitely helped us in this budgeting process this time around. So thanks again for your effort in that, Chief.
And Ms. Hurley. Should we tell her that she's muted?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for advising. I'm Kimberly, I'm just wondering if you could assist council here for just a moment and explain how the capital projects works, from the requested purchases to reserves and to what the actual ask is at the end.
Absolutely.
Just because the questions that you're having right now, under the protected services, most of the requests are from transferring into a reserve. So maybe you could just go through the columns, and then it might help council if they have any questions with regards to the capital process.
Absolutely. Through the CAO back to the mayor and to all of council, the requested purchase on the left-hand side indicates the actual cost of infrastructure or capital purchases we intend to make through the year. The reserve other funding available, you'll see it in the other departments. It's where we're trying to offset the impact on the municipal tax rate by using other reserves, funds, grants, whatever we can get our hands on to reduce the cost. Transfers to specific reserves, this is where we're adding. You're seeing a plus because we're trying to save those dollars, put them aside. They're not being implemented in the 2021 year. So for example, the 2000 GMC tanker under fire, $68,126. That was on the report showing that if we continued to transfer 85% into an asset replacement reserve, by the time we'd make this purchase, we would be short by $68,000. So we're trying to get those dollars into the reserve to make sure that we have the funding available in the future for replacement. So we're not making that purchase this year. That is a transfer to reserve. Any 2020 rollovers, that's the next column, and that's basically rolling forward anything that was approved in a previous year. So an example would be on Fire Hall number 1 design. Council had previously approved and set aside $84,000 previously through a previous year, and therefore we've already generated those dollars through a municipal tax rate. And therefore, we don't need to ask for those dollars again. So that's why that 118,000 is reduced by the 84,000 to only ask for $34,652 from the current municipal taxation year to fund the balance of the project. Transfers to and from asset replacement reserves. Normally, you will see that as a negative. We're pulling from the reserve any funds that have been set aside according to depreciation levels and the percentage in which we were able to put those funds aside. The one exception to that is annually in the finance section where I ask to place into the reserve to top it up based on depreciation levels. So mostly that will be to offset costs. Future budget pre-approvals, it's pre-approval of council, but it's not actually affecting the current year or the current budget. So then when you go across and you take the purchase, subtracting off all of the reserves and available funding that we've had in the past or any grants, we end up with an adjusted total on the right. So for example, on fire hall number 1, 34,652, that's what's actually impacting the current ask of 3% for a municipal tax rate increase. So if you were to, that is a pre-approved project, so a bad one to choose. But if you were to not approve that project, the impact on the 3% would be the 34,652, not the 118,000, because we're only asking for 34,000 in the current year.
Okay, very good. Do we have an idea, sorry, back to the specific transfers into reserves? It's not identified on here. I probably was in the report. What the multiplier are on those. For example, the 2003 Chevy, that's 92,435. It's under the assumption that we're also putting into that next year, the following year. Like, is that a 3 or 4 year plan? Is each of them all the same number of year plan based on the new fire hall construction or on the time of replacement? Just for clarity.
Through you, Mayor, to council. The actual amounts that have been included here are from the schedule in the vehicle fleet report that we brought forward on Monday, but I can pull that back up again. The assumption was that we would continue 85% funding the asset replacement reserve in order to get to whatever outstanding deficit that we still had remaining. However, as far as the timing, I'm just going to let the fire chief speak to the timing of his replacements, because I do know with the fire hall, it does create some different timing in replacing these vehicles because we don't have the new fire hall today. So I'll just allow him to speak to that part.
Okay, I got the chief, and then I can see Deputy Mayor Graham wants to speak too. So go ahead.
I was just going to answer. I was going to answer your question, Mayor, but if you want to let the chief, that's no problem.
All right, we'll give Chief first shot at it here.
No problem. So you want to start with the 2003 Chevy Rescue 1?
Sure.
And bear with me, just finding it on my list here. The replacement date for that is proposed at 2023. The next one, the 89 half ton, it is
So I guess my question, so I don't want to waste your time in the explanation. So my question is, whatever the final amount that's required, there's 85%, or that's the goal, coming from not 85% of purchase price, but 85% of the depreciation of that particular asset that's going to be coming from the asset replacement. So there's that amount, which leaves an unfunded amount that needs to be covered prior to the purchase in 2023, if we use that first example. So in that amount that's left unfunded, I'm under the assumption that the amount we're putting into the reserve is equalized over the balance of time prior to the purchase of that vehicle. So we're not paying it all this year and then nothing for the next 2 years. I'm expecting 3 payments of $92,435, the payment if we're purchasing in 3 years. Is that understanding correct?
That's the intention, yes.
Okay, all right. Deputy Mayor Graham, is that the same answer?
Yeah, if when you're into that fleet management documentation, not all of them are equalized over the course of the year. Some are amortized over more years depending on the need of the sequence. So it's usually based on divided by the number of years remaining before replacement. So some are higher in those years, but they're equalized throughout each column across those years. It's a good question, Mayor, with regards to if there's a percentage unfunded. I don't see that reflected in this, but I mean, it's just to answer your specific question. It's not they're not all 4 years, they're not all 3 years. It depends on the replacement date that the amortization is done at. So.
Yeah, so that was sort of my question. And as far as the part that's already accounted for, so we've got 85% of the asset replacement value plus these payments. Is there any inclusion of development charges towards any of these vehicles? I'm thinking more in line. I know if it's a straight truck for truck and there's no improvement or size increase, you can't. But some of these, I suspect, are going to be larger vehicles. A, because there should be a new fire hall that fits it, but B, because of the need for growth. So is there any components, yes, Ms. Pope, that are related back to DCs that will cover parts of these?
Thank you, Mayor. To all of council, we did look through the DCs when drafting and putting together the vehicle report and pulled out any specific funds, because we do have some other funds that are earmarked and mentioned for certain vehicles, and they have been included. The amount that we're proposing there is the amount that's unfunded. So basically looking at historical cost, everything we've brought into the asset replacement reserve so far, what we intend to bring into the asset replacement reserve at an 85% level going forward until that asset is fully depreciated, then looking at the future costs and where our deficit was. So we did have that and review. We can go back and take another look at DCs to see if there's anything else that can be attributed. But at the time of going through the report, just what we had provided is what was available that was earmarked for those vehicles.
Excellent, very good. Any other questions from members of council? Let me just get that. I know behind the scenes, we're working hard to get the spreadsheet put back up here. And there it is. Any other questions on any of those items specific to protective services? Councillor Huntley.
Through you, Mayor, the ones that aren't the fleet, so that we're transferring money into, like, so the SCUVA, the SRU, even the SRU with the communications and the diesel generator. Is this for infinitum? Is there a target? Like, how do we, like, where are we in kind of what we're trying to build in the reserve on those items?
Chief?
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Huntley. The SCBA, that's a great question. The purchase of that is in 2023, and we've been with council support have been funding that, so that is going to be in the neighborhood of approximately 350,000, and we've been doing that for a number of years. So that money, when we get to 2023, should be in the reserve for that purchase. So it'll be 2023, and then unfortunately, everything has a best before date. The new ones will then start to thing, but the amount may be a little bit less in the beginning years. That'll be up for council's decision. That's a 15-year lifespan on those units. The SRU funding, that's yes, to answer Councillor Huntley's, that's been a year after year request to help offset the participation in the SRU participation with all the other townships in the county to keep the training for the SRU team up. The communications upgrade reserve, that has been going on for a while. With the building of the new hall, there will be, it was discussed some time ago by councils several years ago that the timing of that would be when the fire station number 1 was completed, so that there's we can move to digital. So when that's completed, that one, depending where the federal government goes with the next generation 911, etc., staff will continue to monitor that one, but it's hoped that that one would end with the building of the station and sufficient funds for those upgrades. And just as a side note, the hardware component has been is about, I believe my report says about 90 or 95% complete, so we're in good shape there. It's just the last component of the actual repeater. Diesel generator, that one we could definitely check on and see what's been put in for the last, if we've hit that target. That's the generator that runs the township office here.
Very good.
And that's the replacement for the generator? I'm sorry.
That's
No,
correct. Yeah,
eventually.
it's at some
Yeah.
point that generator will need to be replaced, and those funds are being identified for its replacement.
Any other questions from members of council specific to the protective services?
So
Go ahead, Councillor Huntley.
through you, Chair, not specifically to the protective services, but I guess to Kimberly, when we're identifying these transfer reserves, like under the fire services or anywhere else, I know we have a page that you provided us of the reserves. Can we get the number of the reserve that it's being transferred into so we can kind of see where it's actually landing? Because it's hard to draw a line from that whole column of transfer to specific reserve to actually seeing them in the specific reserves to where they're going. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. Through Councillor Huntley, back to council. Yes, absolutely. You can have that information. Just in summary, it just might be helpful to know that the fire department has what's called emergency equipment reserves. Now, normally when you see reserves, you have all those little tags to tell you where it's coming and going to and from, which we do provide. In the emergency equipment reserves, because that is the default for the fire protective services, that's where they all go to. So right now there's over $668,000 in that reserve, of which about $430,000 is earmarked for various things like bunker gear, generator, diesel generator, pumper, radio equipment, and SCBA units. And then there's about $400,000 of it that's not necessarily earmarked for a particular item, but it is infrastructure that has to go to emergency equipment reserves, because that reserve is built based on the motor vehicle collision invoicing and the funds that are being received from that, which have to go back to the fire department and the capital projects in the fire department. So in general, when you're looking here, unless it's an actual vehicle, when you're looking at the fire hoses and things, if there's not a specific labeled reserve on the reserve report, you can automatically assume emergency equipment reserves, but I can put the little tag on there and put EE beside it or what have you to give you that information for sure in the future budgets.
Well, I think they have identifying numbers, do they not, Ms. Pope? Like they actually have reserve numbers. Yeah.
For emergency equipment, it's one reserve, so it would be one number for all of them.
Right. So I guess then through you, Chair, within that emergency reserve, is it cataloged where? Because if you're setting 10,000 specifically for a generator and 10,000 specifically for communication upgrades, when it hits that reserve and you say there's almost $1 million in that reserve, do you know specifically in that reserve how much is for these individual items, or is it just one big pot that you draw from later?
Anything that was earmarked to go in, we know specifically, and we have marked it. And anything that hasn't been earmarked, the funds have gone in and it hasn't been earmarked, it's general. So that's where I was saying we have, I'm just looking at the report here before me, but 668,000, of which 434,000 is not earmarked for a particular capital purchase, but it is earmarked for emergency equipment in whichever form. And then the rest of it, bunker gear, currently it's 9,500. The fire hall generator, 3,000. Diesel generator, 10,000. Pumper, 100,000. Radio equipment, 50,000, SCBA units, 61,500. So when you take the 434 plus those individual items, you get to the 668 that's there. So if it's earmarked by council through the budget to go in for a specific reason, it's marked and cataloged. If not, it's part of the general and at the discretion of council to be used towards any type of emergency equipment capital.
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Chief.
Thanks. The only thing that I would, and I agree with what Kimberly's saying, but just keep in mind when you look at SCBA's and it says 61,000 and we've been putting, between 48 and 50,000 for the last several years. Out of that number, and I'm estimating at approximately 350,000 in 2023. So I agree that the funds can be earmarked, that's at council's discretion, but I'm just gently reminding that of 2023, there's a what I would consider a significant investment required when the units have timed out, if you will, and required to be replaced.
Okay, Councillor Huntley, you got another one, and then I see Deputy Mayor Graham.
Sorry, so through you, Chair. So I'm kind of stuck on this reserve, and I'm not disagreeing, Chief, that, you know, we need this equipment, we need this equipment. I'm just, when I look at it, and I know Kimberly, you've been quoting the 668,000 number, but when I look at this reserve sheet, you know, by the end of December 2020, or the end of December 2020, it's at $1 million, not 668. You know, and now we're going to add another 360,000 into it. So I'm just, I'm just trying to make, I understand that you need the equipment, Chief, and that's why I was asking whether that is, you know, it's broken down in subcategories underneath it in order to get to where we need to get to. It's just very hard to tell, you know, whether we need to put 10,000 or 20,000 in for your gear. That's all, or I'm trying to get to. So I apologize for harping on this, you know, what's in this reserve.
Thank you, Councillor Huntley. We can definitely answer that. So with motor vehicle collisions, we don't have a guarantee that certain billings can occur because, of course, it's based on motor vehicle collisions that are occurring and what we can and cannot invoice for. That's a bit of a fluctuating number. So as you see the 2020 budget, we were estimating to bring in that $350,000 that you're referring to, that's going to bring up the reserve to just over $1 million. We have to wait till all the billing is completed for 2020. Once that's done, then we can take the estimated out and put in actual, but at this time, it's not there yet. And at that point, then we can confirm with you whether it actually did grow or not. So for example, in the case if there was never an accident throughout the year and there was no billing, then there wouldn't be 350,000 going into that reserve. So that's just an estimate at that point. Cindy, if you just move down a little bit further, there you go. You can see it right, 2655 emergency equipment reserve at the 668,591, which is the number that I was quoting. The 350,000 that was estimated to come through motor vehicle collision and any other additions from the capital that council had approved through 2020. The 2020 budget, all those added together would be the additions there, and it could bring it up to the $1 million. So until we close out the year, I can't guarantee, but we're speaking to what's there currently before we close out the year and transfer those funds over.
So sorry, Kimberly, then on that notion, like, is that 350 or whatever you anticipate revenues will be coming in through motor vehicle collisions, is that used at any point to offset what's in the budget today, or is that only used to add to reserve for later?
That the $350,000 would be a combination of the 2020 transfers to the reserve that were approved by council, and then any motor vehicle collision funds that would come in. We never pull down from a reserve unless we have the approval of council. So it would have to be earmarked in a report or in the budget stating that we were going to use X amount of dollars from the emergency equipment reserve.
Okay. I guess, so through you, Chair, I guess the other side of it is, do we get a report ever to know what gets transferred into the reserve from revenues coming in from motor vehicle collision?
A specific report, you would see the revenues on the revenue line on the detailed pages from the fire department in their billings, and you can see the total amount. If we were, I can show you as an example in the 2021 budget of where we're estimating and where we're at. So Cindy, if you could please open for me the detailed pages for fire, thank you very much. And then scroll down. Continue to the next page, please. Thank you. Yep, continue on down. And more, yep. Stop right there, please. So you can see equipment reserves. So under the equipment reserves, for line number 0144199199, that's where the billing that the fire department does for all of their motor vehicle collisions would go through. They had anticipated to receive 50,000. If they had received 50,000, it would be used towards the budget, and any excess above the 50,000 would be transferred out to the reserve. As you can see this past year, the billing may not be fully posted for December. However, they're under. So in this particular case, there would not be a transfer. There have been in the past, though, user fees and charges that were much greater, and they have been transferred out. That's why that top line, the 8910 contribution to reserve. So in the year in which that occurs, you'll see a number flow through there showing it transferring out. So that's the exact place where you'd be able to see the funds coming in if there was any excess transferred out.
Okay, so through you again, Chair, that whatever funds come in are used to offset the operating expenses, and whatever's left then gets transferred into the reserves.
Correct. So right
Gotcha.
now it's 50,000 estimated to be used for the current budget, and any excess goes out to the reserve. Each year that line could change. It just happens to be coincidentally that that's what's needed to balance the budget for the both the last year in 2020 and 2021. So they are the same number at 50,000 budgeted.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Pope. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Councillor Huntley. And over to Deputy Mayor Graham. Do you remember your question?
I do. I think I thought the initial question was pertaining, or maybe making a suggestion with regards to tracking some of the funding or the earmarking, to use Kimberly's vernacular. In the context, I know we're in the first year of having the fleet management, but I think it's a substantially beneficial document. And I was wondering if it might be possible. I was thinking, as Bill was talking, I was looking at the different, almost everything I believe everything in that capital that is to be funded is reflected in this larger document. But what it doesn't have is what's been earmarked to date. So you see all of the 10,000 or 50,000 here or there contributions to be made from reserves towards it, but there isn't an up-to-date summary as to what exists in that account now. Is that something that could potentially be added moving forward, as maybe not past years? I know there's some technical issues with that, but it would sort of be helpful to understand what's been earmarked towards it. And it's probably far more complicated than enhancing or breaking down the reserve report, because the account that it goes into is sort of, as long as it works, but knowing by the breakdown here what's been allocated already to these different projects might be a benefit if it could be an added column into that report moving forward. Does that make sense?
Through you, Councillor, to all of council, we can definitely modify the report. I just may not be 100% understanding the request, but we will work with you.
Sure.
And as far as the reserves go, most of them are specific, and they only have the funds as per what they're identified as. So official plan, railway reserve, Superior Tanker Shuttle, etc. There is this one, which is the emergency reserve, that does have earmarking on the inside. And I understand what you're saying, because you see emergency equipment and you don't know what the breakdown of that 668,000 is. But the rest of the reserves are identified for particular projects. So I think maybe what we could do is the emergency equipment reserve could be expanded on a separate sheet so that you can see the earmarking and to give you that picture of what's made up in there. Most of the others we can go through with a fine-tooth comb, but most of the others are specific, and there wouldn't be any further earmarking or breakdown that I could provide because they're specific to the project.
Sorry, Kimberly, I think I misspoke. What I was saying is it might be easier if it could be reflected in the 10-year capital forecast as an additional column, rather than broken down in the reserve where the money's going is one part of the problem. But now that we have this 10-year forecast, if we simply had a column that said what had been earmarked to date, right, like maybe prior to that 2020 year, or at the end, formatting permitting, you would then just know if it's a new, if we've just started contributing versus we've been contributing for a decade, or it's a constant, as Ryan mentioned, it might be one of those things that we're constantly contributing to from a reserve contribution.
Right. Absolutely.
I thought that might be easier than making any adjustments to the reserve report.
Absolutely, we can add that in. It's a little bit similar to what you had requested, or what was requested in the fleet, to provide you with that detail as well. So we can definitely take a look at that and try to update that to give you a sense of where you're at and what you have in these particular columns. It is much larger than just the fleet, so we wouldn't have it necessarily ready for final draft, but we can definitely incorporate it for future updates on the 10-year capital and for future budget consideration as well.
Thank you.
Very good. Councillor Huntley, new question, then we got Councillor Belch after that.
Oh, I'm going to change the topic slightly. So if Councillor Belch is around protective services, then let him go.
Councillor Belch?
Okay. Yep, through you, Mayor. Just wondering, is it useful at all, because I'm thinking that maybe it would be for council to know at what particular point in time with our reserves is the percentage that's been built up that, do we have like 80% of what's going to be needed from year to year, and then going to be adding more a reserve in? How far away are we from sort of meeting the needs to pay for a particular piece of equipment? I guess that would be for Kimberly.
Thank you, Councillor Bouch. Through you back to council, that you're basically talking about the asset management plan. As you know, council did approve our first plan with the 4 main categories of infrastructure required, which is the roads and the water, wastewater, and bridges, and one more that's just running off the top of my head, but either way, the 4 main ones, and then all of the other assets, the municipality has been working behind the scenes to get those done as part of the asset management process for reporting. And we also purchased Citywide, which it's been loaded and staff will be trained in 2021 how to use that. And all of that information is contained within that. We just have to get access to learning how to use it and pulling the data from there. It's one of the reasons why we switched over to Citywide, because our Keystone application could not manage more than simple depreciation calculations. It couldn't handle maintenance, risk, or conditions, and it also couldn't hold reserves side by side with that kind of information. So I'm very much hopeful that by next year, with the use of Citywide, you will receive much more detailed reporting that will show you these attachments without having to ask for these separate individual spreadsheets and give you the full picture that you're looking for. Also, we will be publishing in the future an asset management plan and bringing it forward to council for consideration, which will include all the assets of the municipality and hopefully be ahead of any type of deadlines that are coming down from the OREG.
Great.
And over to Councillor Huntley.
Through you, Chair. I had 2 things. One, I was going to ask whether we needed to make a motion to have those things, put in formally, but it sounds like Ms. Pope already has a game plan for bringing forward the asset management plan. So I think we're okay, especially with the new software. But I guess the other thing that while we had the reserve sheet open, I did notice that there was a reserve for the official plan. So I was curious on, I believe one of the capital asks was $50,000 towards the official plan this year, with 20,000 coming from DCs. Is there a reason we didn't draw from the official plan reserve as well to help offset that?
For you, Councillor Huntley, to council, the reserves, what the municipality does do is we look at our DCs to pull down from there, because we want to make sure that we're utilizing them first. And so that when we have the next DC report and we're doing the capital, we can show the investment and use of those funds, and then also have the ability to then levy future funds. So it is the primary ask first when we're looking at reserves. And then secondary, if needed, we go back to then our reserve report to see if we do have any funding sitting there. So the default would be go to DCs first, and then they can come here and request a transfer from these reserves thereafter.
Okay, so Ms. Pope, I believe we did go to DCs first, but we didn't go to the reserves to see if there were a reserve there. We went straight to levy. So my question is there a reason we didn't go to reserve for the OP?
I'm not 100% sure. I might need to turn that over to Mr. Connolly just for discussion, but also just the knowledge of the availability of that reserve and potentially the project in which they're moving forward with. I'm not 100% sure. I need to turn over to him to answer for that.
Mr. Conley, There we go.
I'm here. So I didn't catch all of that just because of a bit of flickering in terms of internet being unstable apparently. But as I understand, this is obviously the reserve for the OP was something that was set up before my time. But the whole notion of an OP is that as we go forward, we get our official plan in place, and we either are spending dollars with respect to implementation, things that come up, either appeals or other things that may come up as a matter of implementing that official plan, and also, as always, getting ready for the next official plan. So I believe that's why that reserve was set up. But that's as I understand it. So if I've missed a question, by all means, please ask again, and I'll see if I can pull that out of my experience on this.
Right. So through you, Chair, then my question is, we're requesting money for official plan work throughout the course of 2021. We're using DCs to offset it, which is absolutely fair. But then the question is, why are we not tapping into the reserve that we have set aside for official plan to also offset it? Or is there a policy in place that we need to keep a certain amount of funds in that official plan reserve? I'm just curious, why are we going to levy before we're going to reserves for this?
And Ms. Hurley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that it is something that we could consider, and it's something that Councillor Huntley brought up a good point. We do have monies in the reserve for the official plan amendments down the road, but it is something that we could consider now. And with your support, we could certainly have the DCs and take money from reserves, depending upon what the portion is that council would like to do. But there is money there, and we could utilize that, as per Councillor Huntley has pointed it out. So Kimberly, I guess through you, Mr. Chairman, to Ms. Pope, if we wanted to address the remainder through the reserves, we can certainly identify that, correct, Ms. Pope?
Absolutely, we could definitely take it from the reserve. I would just want to revisit perhaps historically with the funds that have been put aside, that if there was a certain target that they were trying to meet for whatever purpose, just to make sure that we're not depleting. But yes, absolutely, with discussion, we could definitely take it from there.
Okay, and when we set up that official plan reserve, I don't recall specifically. I went through the last official plan. We probably set it up shortly thereafter, but since that time, we've also had discussions with approved rolling our official plan into the county. So we may wish to have that bigger discussion as well to see if we're on target, overfunded or underfunded.
Through you, Chair, to Council, we'll take a look at that. Again, from any other place, any other jurisdiction I've worked in, the idea is that we've tried to set a reserve aside because, again, you don't want to, as you work towards a municipal comprehensive review, is all of a sudden have a big ask of Council and again, strain the taxpayer on that. So I'll work with the CEO and Kimberly and take a look at what it was set up for and see where we are and see what the options are.
Excellent. Good point. Thank you, Councillor Huntley. Thank you, Mr. Connolly and Ms. Pope. Any other questions
Thank you.
Specifically on this? We somehow dragged Mr. Connolly into our discussion in fire and protective services. Well done, Councillor Huntley. Anything else on this specific one before we move to the next one? Because I know Mr. Hancock is just excited to get started here. We are moving on. Okay, Public Works, Solar Operating Fleet and Environmental Services, Mr. Hancock. Floor is yours. We'll wait till they have the report before us, and then I'll open up the floor to council for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think on 2 points. One, council has asked us for, I'm not sure, they've asked us for a report on solar, and we are working towards that, and our date is early part of March to report back on the contracts that we have with solar and where we are on repaying our loan on that. So that was one request of council previously. So we have that. I believe we've gone through, just looking at the table, it's kind of floating along. So they've, I think we jumped over Parks and Rec there, but anyhow. So we'll stay with the one major change I would note in the roads and environmental services capital. we've removed the Capital Works Depot and Millbrook Yard design request. We had in, you might remember, we were carrying numbers of 1.2 million in 2021, and we were also carrying 1.3 for completion in 2022. In addition, we had looked at the Millbrook Yard at 400,000 in 2022, and the completion of the Millbrook Yard in 2023 of another 400,000. So they have been reduced to allow us only to complete the design and the tender, and to coincide with the fire hall that we've talked about, with the opportunity that we're hoping to come forward that we might be able to call all three tenders at once, subject to a report from, I think, finance and how that might be funded. That's one pending item. I think most of the projects have been laid out on a plan for council. They've seen our major ones on spray seal, surface treatment, and hardtop or asphalt, hot mix asphalt. The one project that is subject to an ICIP grant was the urbanization of Main Street. That's a large project, includes water main replacement, which is in the capital budget for water, and the number is 1.65 in this budget million. We are looking, and we have not heard anything on that. So again, that project is on hold till we hear something on the grant application, and then it would be subject to a report coming back to council at that point. So most of these are ones that we are tendering jointly with the county or calling ourselves. They are tenders that we would typically call this spring. We have had pre-approval, as Kimberly has noted, on the tandem truck and the excavator, and we are presently in the final drafts of the tender to be issued shortly. So that's sort of an overview. If there's any specific questions on capital or operating, I'm here to try and answer them as with the other department heads.
Very good. Questions from members of council? Councillor Huntley.
Through your chair to Mr. Hancock, I guess still on this whole concept of replacement reserves and whatnot. For the crossroad culverts, you're pulling out 2,000. Like it seems like an awfully piddly little number against $120,000. Like, is there a reason why only two? Like, are you trying to balance out what you had and spread it around? Like, it just seems like such an odd, bizarre little number.
I think from my part, there's a couple of different comments. One, I'm not sure that crossroad culverts were clearly defined in our asset management program previously, and that's come to note more with Citywide and trying to distinguish larger and more costly culverts. So that's an item that's come to the forefront, and the dollars set aside are relatively small because we've not been doing the same as we have in some of the other areas, specifically related to equipment. So the crossroad culvert is an area that the assets are continuing to be updated this year, and you will see more funds being probably requested to go to asset replacement reserve once we get into the program further. We had identified in the road needs, we had identified two, as our consultant had indicated, two immediate needs. We had elected to not only reduce their capital numbers, but also spread the two now needs, as we call them, over 2 years. So we have one in 2021 and we have the second one in 2022. And it's been our experience that if we do it using our own staff and purchase the materials, that we found it to be cost effective. And it's actually a team building exercise when you complete a project of some magnitude. So while the assets are, I think, are not current, I believe that's an issue that they have not been properly laid out previously in our asset replacement program, and that's coming into play more as we complete the citywide program.
How's that?
I'm not entirely sure that answered the question, but I think I guess the question is 2,000 the right number, or could that be a bigger number if need be? I mean, if we're if our goal, or if, Deputy Mayor Graham's goal is to get under the 3%, I mean, is there a reason we're not drawing more from a reserve in a situation like that?
Ms. Pope?
Thank you. To Councillor Huntley through Council, the reason why there's only 2,000, Wayne, Director has touched on it, but if it's identified in the asset plan and identified as an asset, then the percentage in which Council has approved transferred into the asset replacement reserve is then applied and the funds are pulled out. As they haven't been identified in the asset replacement plan in the past, they weren't brought forward as part of a depreciation level, therefore not assessed. As they are being now identified and added, we will have funding in the future. We've pulled the maximum available that's been placed in. It's the same type of calculation when you're looking at all of the other items. If they're in the asset replacement and Council funds at 85%, then whatever depreciation level of that year is, we can pull 85% of the depreciation for that particular year and do that for every year in which it exists. So I think it is twofold. One, it needs to be identified, first of all, and not placed under an operating cost or rolled in with roads. And two, that we need to, as we fund, we can pull down. So that is the maximum right now because that's what's in there. But going forward, as projects go forward and the identification is there, we'll have the opportunity to pull the value that's in there.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
That's a better answer, isn't it, Councillor Hunt?
It was a little better, yeah.
I don't know, Mr. Hancock, I appreciated the verbiage. That was a good long answer.
We work as a team.
Absolutely. So Ms. Councillor Huntley, if you could just specify whether you want a short answer or a long answer, I will direct it accordingly. Any other questions from members of council? Deputy Mayor Graham, short answer or long answer?
I love hearing from Wayne, but I feel like I should be hearing for Kimberly. But I'll leave it up to the audience. My question is not necessarily, well, anyways, we'll see depending on who answers, they might phrase it differently. With regards to the alleyway on King Street, my only, I know this is a long-standing identified project and we're rolling over 25,000. My question is probably to Wayne, given his expertise on the subject, is my only reason for potentially considering, any sort of delay or reduction in the investment in this specific project would be if it was going to present a substantial disruption to any of the businesses or tenants that are, going to be impacted by this work this year. More so, obviously, concerned, not that I'm not concerned with the tenants in those facilities, but if it was going to be an impediment to some of the businesses, I would be more concerned because of, COVID and the limitations therein. And I know that even when it comes to street closures on the front, there's issues with deliveries and things like that. And I know that that's an ongoing issue that some of the businesses have been affected by with COVID as well. So that's just didn't know if you thought that was something that was worth considering, or if you don't believe it's a worthwhile concern.
To you, Mr. Mayor, to the deputy. First of all, just a note again, we were requested by council to bring a report back on the alleyway. You may remember that we had noted the possibility of some property owners not being cooperative and it may require expropriation. So we are planning to report on this, and the numbers, I think there's been some question about whether 100,000 is enough in dealing with this from the point of view of whether we get into expropriation and purchase of property. And then there's the issue of improvements generally in the area. Most recently, I can tell you that I've been contacted by a couple of property owners that are asking us to move ahead. They're asking us to look at this, and they're asking us to clean up the back area. So I believe we should leave it in, and I think we'll get our legal input on expropriation, and we'll come back to you with some timeframes at a point in early March, and then we can see whether this should ultimately end up being deferred partially or all of it. I would like to, I think it's a key area that needs cleanup, and I believe that's kind of the wish of council. So again, I would prefer that we leave it and we move forward and come back with a report in early March.
Very good.
Okay.
Follow up? No. Oh, we seem to be able to deal with the expropriation issues with stop signs, Mr. Hancock.
Yes.
Any other questions? I see Falls Line East, Falls Line West. I think we had a brief discussion on it last time. Is that immediately east and west of Tapley? Is that what those are?
Yes.
Okay. That was a quick answer. Perfect. Councillor Henley?
Through you again, Chair. I guess I'm taking this whole asset reserve thing to a new level this time around. But looking at the replacement of your 2008 Dodge Ram at 50K, and you explained that trucks are about 50K these days, which is fine, and you're going to tender it. But you're only pulling 17,000 out of the asset replacement reserve. And I thought we were talking about you could pull up to 85% out of the asset reserve, for these replacements. I guess this goes back to the question, is only certain amounts of money associated with specific assets, or can we look at the fleet as one big asset, that we really got to track and monitor? And right now, if we got to replace this guy and we just haven't had the time to come up with 85% on this specific asset, can we borrow from other assets to offset this one? I guess, I'm just wondering about juggling those asset reserves. Do we have any freedom in it, or is it specific to that asset? Ms. Pope, for a short answer.
I was ready for this one too. Anyhow, go ahead, Kimberly.
Ms. Pope for 200.
Yeah, interesting to hear that response, Wayne. The asset replacement reserve, if I can just clarify, we started in 2010 with $285,000. There was no funds prior to 2010. And if you recall, asset planning, asset management, and all that information coming forward to council was legislated, and it began on January 1st of 2009. So there wasn't that there before. So if you think about that, all the historical assets that remained in the municipality did not have any funding set aside except for, general reserves where something's earmarked, what have you, but no actual regular every year look at what are we using, what do we need to put aside. Then in 2010, the 285,000 that was put aside, which was fantastic. It was a beginning, but that was 24% of the asset replacement. So basically, when I go back to do the calculation, if the asset existed, which they all existed, pardon me, if the asset was still depreciating, so it wasn't a fully depreciated asset. So our Millbrook Arena would have been a fully depreciated asset, so there'd be no depreciation. But if an asset existed at that time and had a depreciation value, we would have transferred only 24% to offset that annual use. That's all. Then in 2011, 32%. In 2012, 69%. In 2013, 88%. So we take a look at every single year what's been put aside. If I look back since 2010 and I wanted to average out what we have put aside, we are basically at 74% of what's been depreciating since 2010 on average throughout the years, because we've had other years where we've been able to get up higher to 80% or 88% or what have you. So that is a moving target, and I have to do the calculations for each asset, and we pull down what we've placed in. Have we done borrowing from asset replacement reserve? Absolutely. We just spoke to the solar loans, the street lights, the solar loans, and we do identify them on the reserve report. So we do internal borrowing for some of our projects so that we don't have to go out and do some external borrowing, and we do replace those funds. So in 2021 now, we don't have to repay because the streetlights are now paid in full, but we did borrow from there. So when we're drawing down 74%, where you get the 85%, and I totally know where you're getting that from, is the discussion today and on the vehicle report, which is what we're trying to push forward to say, council, if you would consider constantly transferring as we move forward an 85% line, which is what we've suggested in this draft here, trying to keep that at the forefront for council, then in the future, this is the deficit that we see. But if there was only 24%, well, then the deficit is going to be higher for the future cost. So asset replacement isn't as simple as quoting one number. Yes, we're asking for an 85% level now and going forward. Will that be attainable? Let's take a look. The CMCC is still to come on board as an asset and be calculated in the 2020 year. So it may not be attainable, and I just don't know. We're not at 100% fully funded. I can tell you we're 74% fully funded since 2010. Not all of our assets are funded at 74% because many were fully depreciated even before we even started this process. So we are in a very good position. We continue to do this and council continues to support asset replacement, but we're not fully funded and the calculations aren't as simple as one number.
Councillor Huntley?
Mr. Hancock, you got a short answer?
I thought she did very well.
Thank you, Wayne.
Just for clarity, Councillor Huntley specifically made reference to the 2008 Dodge Ram. Now, we didn't, you've gone through all the percentages, I understand that, but it would depreciate the most in the first couple of years. And given that we're contributing a very low percentage in the early years of that particular item, because the amounts are put away on a per item basis, that would be the justification why we only have 17.5, because it was a 2008 purchase. The most depreciation happened in the first couple of years. And as it gets closer to the end, there's nothing probably at this point even going away. Correct?
That is correct. The Public Works Director has fleet. Some of them are by years and some are by kilometers. Mostly the tandems are about 300,000 for the kilometer base. So depending on usage, but that particular vehicle, Wayne, that's one of your vehicles that are per year, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think,
7 or 10 years.
short answer, I think, the mayor is correct there. The major depreciation was in the first 2-3 years of the life of the vehicle.
Before we were putting money away.
That's right.
Before
And we
we put money away.
weren't fully funding anyhow.
Very good. So back to the earlier question from Councillor Huntley, then the $2,000 that is for crossroad culverts, is that $2,000 specific to the actual cross culverts that are being replaced for the 120, or is that from the general count of cross culverts?
That, well, first of all, I think just to go back to the item, most of our culverts have been covered off our operating accounts, and they basically are more typically the driveway culverts. And I think what Kimberly and I were both talking about, when you get to the larger culverts, they haven't specifically been allotted in the asset replacement. So the 2,000 is coming out of culverts towards this, and it's only because they're being identified as we go along with the asset replacement program for culverts.
Okay, so it's the 2,000 is in general. So the 2,000
Yes.
actually just depleted the cross culvert asset replacement. Yes. Okay. Fair enough. Any other questions on roads and environmental services? Don't worry, Mr. Hancock's not going away because water and wastewater is next. Okay, we'll move on. Water, wastewater, Mr. Hancock.
So do you want me to deal with, do you want to deal with capital or operating?
It looks like we're dealing with parks and facilities.
Okay, so
Hold on.
we have the capital here now. So the projects that have been identified are, one is the water main replacement on Main Street. That one is part of the overall project and would be subject to a grant approval. The water wastewater master servicing study is a split study being undertaken by RVA. So that is the project that we started in 2020 and will complete this year. And of course, the sewer relining is the last year of the sewer relining in Millbrook. So this completes that 4-year program that we reported on. And I believe we've seen substantial reductions in flows to our plant from the main pipes. So the sewer relining is starting to show through the flows to our plant, starting to show the benefits already. But it is that is the program for this year.
Very good. A couple questions. So the water master servicing study and the wastewater master servicing study, is there no components of those studies that is coming from development charges?
Kimberly may want to comment. It's 100% development charge funded.
I thought so too.
Just, Kimberly, are you there?
Sure, I'm right here. Wayne, I know that in the municipal budget affecting the tax rate, you've applied the DCs for the upcoming 18,000 adjustment with the DCs that we're doing through the water wastewater, because that does attribute to all of our DCs. On this particular side here, you had the 50,000 rollover, but there's no indication here of coming from DCs, so we can pull that schedule out if you want and take a look at it so you can update this.
Yeah, we should do that. It is, it was a development project, so it was our intent to have it paid for by that, but we'll check that and have it corrected.
Fantastic. Any other questions on water, wastewater? None. Councillor Belch, do you have any questions on water, wastewater before we move on? We're just about to let Wayne Wayne off the hot seat here. We'll move on to Parks and Facilities.
There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock. Next up, we have Parks and Facilities Operating and Fleet, and I believe we have Chris and Yvette. Yvette is available too. Nope, Yvette's not available. Chris? Yvette is back. And Chris.
Chris, you can go ahead.
And there we go.
There we
Excellent.
go.
There we go. Hello.
Okay, members of council, do you have any questions for Chris on Parks and Facilities, any of those particular items? We got Councillor Huntley and then Deputy Mayor Graham.
Sorry, that was just an itch.
Oh, Deputy Mayor Graham, is that an itch or a question?
Well, I was just going to ask Chris if he could speak, or Yvette, just speak to the glycol removal and, just with regards to that cost that's for that facility.
Yeah, I can talk about that through you, Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Graham. What we have with the glycol is the glycol is still in the concrete floor in the Millbrook Arena and the underfloor heating. So we're looking, there's 2,500 gallons of glycol still sitting in those lines. It takes 5,000 gallons of fresh water to flush them. So we're looking at 7,500 gallons that needs to be disposed of. We need to get that glycol out of there. If we ever had a leak, then we'd be into more expenses with that one.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Ms. Hurley has a question for Chris.
No, but Chris probably could answer this one as well through you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make note that there is an error in front of you, the municipal office renovation design. That municipal office renovation design should be 410,000. So with Ms. Pope's assistance later on, we'll take a look and see if there's any funds left. We did depreciate the municipal office reserve, but there could be some additional funds through DCs, but I wanted to make note, as you know, our tender alone was at 400,000 and we have architectural works that need to be required as well. So we have, we are asking for additional 30,000 in that area, but we will come back to you with where we can pull that from.
Okay, very good. Just for clarity, is there any way to pull this spreadsheet down? I can't see what the columns are. I see all the red where there's money's coming out, but I don't know where it's from. Have we got the? Perfect. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
So the municipal office furniture, fixtures, and equipment, we have 70. Oh, so we're asking for 170 is already in the municipal assets. Okay, replacement. Very good. Any other questions? Nope.
We sound good.
We are looking good. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Yvette.
Thank you.
And back to Yvette, Office of the CIO.
That was too quick, I guess.
Nice try.
Yeah, right. So
Okay.
the office, I don't have any, there is no obviously capital, however, just regular operations, which Ms. Pope has before you as we speak.
Well, we're doing operations later, so I guess you're off the hook then.
There you go.
Okay, clerk, do you have any capital? Your ward boundary of capital?
Yes, sir, just the ward boundary.
Ward boundary, and it's pre-approved, so you're off the hook too. Okay. Council, we don't have any capital. Boards and authorities? Damn. I think that's the only thing we got. Final payment. Anything else other than that on the boards and authorities? That's it. Okay. Finance and IT, Ms. Pope.
Thank you, Council. Just a quick update to our conversation. I was looking into the DCs. The $50,000 rollover from last year is pulling down on the maximum that were in the DCs for the study. And so there are no further funds to pull from the current DC on the water wastewater side where we just had the discussion. So that 50,000 rollover is last year's pull down to the DCs. There's no other funds available. As far as finance, so we talked about the asset management policy, AMP, and adding all those other components and the different requirements, and we're following and working with Public Sector Digest and all the steps along the way. So the ask is for $22,000 additional this year. We're hoping to receive another FCM grant again, and we're proposing the $22,000 in this year's budget with some rollover from last year. Asset management reserve, this is where you see that 85% level that we're trying to get to and potentially stay at if possible. So I'm asking for $1.7 million to go in there. Again, that's just 85% of the depreciation on assets that we do see in the previous fiscal year's depreciation levels. The development charges study update was updated from an initial quote of 30,000. They've been able to reduce it based on work so far and what's left to be done in the 2021 year. So that's a quote from Watson Associates for $18,000. And then again, Council, for your consideration, just to place funds into that combined infrastructure reserve of $300,000. Under IT, we have the hardware replacement program and upgrades. That's a 3 to 5 year program to ensure that all the hardware is working, compatible, upgraded, and deployed to all of our staff. The financial management software was approved in the last budget. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. We're going to head on a 18-month journey for that implementation. The IT policy handbook and the test and validate security posture. Because I cannot confirm those dollars, I was very hesitant in bringing forward both the $16,000 in the recommendation and the $35,000 in the recommendation, because I really truly believe that we have a partnership with the county that we can leverage and work with them. I've already been speaking with the manager there, and we believe we can work together in some of this work. So I'm only proposing $16,000 in the current year budget with an ask for $35,000 pre-approval next year. But as we progress through the year, there's a potential that I may not need that $35,000. It's not being levied in this year's tax rate. It's just being identified here so that you know where the MMP recommendations did come in. And it's not that I'm proposing to not go ahead. I'm proposing that we go ahead and perhaps do it at a better cost and use the resources that we have available with the county. Network server and switches, as per discussions with the county on what still needs to be done above and beyond the 30,000 that we had for last year. I know the mayor spoke at the last council meeting about a timeline. I have been in discussion with the manager there again, talking about the timeline in regards to as we work together on the implementation with rolling out Diamond and the virtual city hall over the next 18 months and ensuring that the infrastructure and the servers, we get a timeline as well to bring back to council. They also suggested as well that it's fantastic timing as well because we are moving from server-based to iCloud-based. There's a bit of savings they think that can be realized as we move forward with some of these applications. So very excited about what the next 18 months has to bring. Are there any questions for?
Fantastic. I think we got Deputy Mayor Graham's up with a question.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor. I had a conversation with Ms. Pope yesterday with regards to the infrastructure reserve, and I want to make sure I communicate this right, Kimberly, but I'm sure you'll correct me. I think what staff has proposed in this structure is the creation of a new infrastructure reserve rather than one that pre-exists. And I think what my rationale would be is that wouldn't we just simply put any of the monies that we're putting away into the asset replacement reserve, simply to have the freedom to utilize them for those sorts of purposes, which these projects are absolutely one of. Obviously, we already have the $1.6 million in a dedicated fire hall reserve. So I'm not sure of the flexibilities that we would have to utilize that reserve for all of these different projects, but it would seem to me to be the simplest way forward to simply, rather than create an infrastructure reserve or muddy the waters with something else, we would simply allocate any funds that I'm not sure it's going to be 300, but if there are funds being dedicated, wouldn't we be simpler to just put them in the asset replacement reserve wouldn't that accomplish the same sort of objective?
Thank you, Mayor Graham, or Deputy Mayor Graham. Yes, absolutely. The reason why we identified it separately for council, we wanted it to be glaringly obvious that this is what we were bringing forward, that we wanted funds to appear before council so that you knew where some of your 3% was coming from. Because if you remember in the first draft, there was no recommendation here. There are other recommendations for separately for fire hall, separately for public works. I have tried to identify that in both in the presentation earlier as well. If you place those funds in the asset replacement reserve, just like we have done, like I said, for the solar, for the street lights, we can borrow against the asset replacement reserve. The asset replacement reserve is funds are set aside there according to council's motion. So if council's motion is to place 300,000 into that reserve to later be pulled for future infrastructure, then that's exactly what can be done. We didn't want to assume or make a decision on council's behalf and just increase the asset replacement reserve. So we have identified it separately, but absolutely it is up to the discretion of council on what you would like to do with that 300,000 and or if you accept a 3% increase or want to amend that tax levy increase.
Thank you.
Very good. I do commend Chief Belfour and Mr. Hancock. They're very persistent. We stripped out $1 million each on the last budget, and there we go. We got a $300,000 added back in for infrastructure projects. So they're certainly persistent. And I think we'll capture all of that in essence when we get to the end of this and we have a full view of the entire budget, and we can come back and make specific recommendations or changes to the individual line items for sure. But thank you very much for pointing that specific item out. Any other questions from members of council as it relates to this section with finance and IT with Ms. Pope? Seeing none, very good. And last but not least, we have police. Is there anything specific on that? I know we've got our contract negotiations, but on the capital side, there shouldn't be anything.
Mayor, there are no capital requests for the police in this budget.
Perfect. Okay. So that wraps up the once through on the capital. Now we will go right back up to the top and do it with the operating, but before we do a quick 5 minutes, and then we'll be right back at it. All right, we got 3 councillors back, waiting for Councillor Huntley. That's not Councillor Huntley. That is Councillor Huntley. Excellent. All ready to go then? Oh, Councillor Belch is muted. All ready to go, Councillor Belch?
There we go. I just wondered whether we're going to get into more discussions about the library.
We're going to wrap it up at the end, I think, with a fulsome discussion on where we want to end up with this tax rate and some of the items that we've discussed. During that break, I had a point of sitting with Kimberly to go through those items. So yeah. If you'll give me the opportunity, once we've wrapped up the operations, I can go through some of that and then we can embark on those discussions at that point.
Okay.
All right. Okay, staff ready? We are now moving into the operations of the, with the same order as far as the departments go. Miss Hurley, are you there? She wanted me to go through line by line of the entire operational budget, but I don't think we need to do that.
I don't believe Ms. Hurley asked that.
So we have been through this before, and out of respect for staff's time as well, is there any questions from any members of council with regards to any operational item of any of the departments? Councillor Huntley.
Sorry, Scott or Mayor. Before we go there, I think there was a really good summary of what each department had done. Maybe, for sake of starting the conversation, we just bring that up so we can kind of see.
All right. This is like kind of, hey, Google, because there's somebody in the background that's working on bringing up right now what you've asked for.
Alexa?
Yeah, or Alexa, yeah, or Siri.
Siri. I'm afraid to say that, all our phones will go off.
All right, very good. Can you see that, Councillor Huntley?
This wasn't what I was thinking of. I think Ms. Pope, when the presentation she went through had something for each one of the.
Is that it?
Yes, there's,
but it was.
the next one
Sorry,
would
go
show
ahead.
then each department. Keep going down, Cindy, right there.
There we are. Yeah.
There.
This one.
Okay. Very good. So do you want to just go through each particular one then? There? Any questions with regards to planning and economic development?
Is this the beginning of it? Like, I think is this the first page of it?
I'm guessing this was the first. Yeah. Ooh.
Okay.
Yes, that was the first page.
Okay. Is there anything between those 3 departments? We could ask Mr. Phillips to justify his 14.7% increase, but in the conversation, we'd spend more than $1,190. I don't see anything up on that one specifically, unless anybody else has a particular question. Are we good so far? No. Okay, next. Protective Services, 3.3% increase. Public Works, 0.4. Anything specific on those? Nope. Okay, next. %1.7% on environmental services, 1.4 on decrease on parks and facilities. Okay. Next. 0.7% decrease and 6.4 decrease. Any questions on those two?
Decreases are good.
Decreases are good. This is good. Next. Increase in finance, 3.3. Uh, 0.2% increase for council. And an estimate. Oh, go ahead, Deputy Mayor Graham.
Yep, no problem. Kimberly, just to sort of circle back to square with regards to some of the capital conversations, there might be some overlaps with some of the finance and IT department stuff. Is there, you mentioned that, we're having ongoing conversations with the county. Do we have any insight as to what the timeline might be for I think it probably pertains more to the capital discussion, but I'm just wondering, we're having those conversations, is it 6 months? Is it next year that we're going to know, which of these sort of potentially, or how much of these potentially sort of shiftable components of this whole endeavor that we're going through, which I fully support. I'm just curious as to when we might know what the actual financial impacts are for the combination of, or the complexities of this project.
We can hear you, Deputy Mayor Graham, but your lips aren't moving.
Oh.
You were frozen. We heard you. It's okay.
Good.
I did hear you, Deputy Mayor Graham. Great questions. I have had follow-up conversations. We're constantly in conversation. They're excellent to work with. And with regards to our vendor of record in last year and the 6-month delay in receiving product, I've already received a quote back. We expect delivery by the end of February on our hardware IT. So that's the most recent information I can give you with regards to our rollout program. That's our infrastructure, the server. That is going to be done in alignment with the Diamond software update because we're moving to some cloud-based applications versus hardware. We want to make sure that we're not over purchasing on the server, and we're also making sure the infrastructure is in place on the uploading of the data, et cetera, into the cloud. So we will have an updated timeline, but because that's a team of people working together, including Diamond, a number of staff here, and the County of Peterborough together, our meeting is planned for next week, and I will have a further update on that. But it seems like since the original COVID shutdown occurred last March to now, the ebbs and flows are starting to correct themselves, and we're back on board to something that we're more used to, or what's more normal for both the county and ourselves. So I believe that we have a good timeline coming forward. We can see hardware implementation. If they're receiving product by the end of February, then my anticipated result would be that staff are receiving them sometime in March, early March, and the deployment would be occurring. Does that answer your question?
To an extent, I'm assuming that there's lots of moving parts, but some with bigger fiscal impacts than others. I was just curious if there was going to be, if we did become aware that certain elements of this, whether it's I think it was somewhere in the realm of 18 or 16,000 for the handbook and, things like that. I just, it might not be the huge reduction in levy implications that we're looking for, but like I said, every little bit adds up. So I was just curious if there was certain parts of it that we were going to potentially know, probably not once or before the budget's finalized, but sort of as we go, if that's going to be brought to our attention, so that we're just we're doing the best we can with what we know at this point, I guess.
Sure, I can further elaborate on the MNP recommendations. So with regards to that, the county themselves also had the same group give them recommendations, and they had received back similar recommendations with regards to the IT policy handbook development. And they were saying because they're moving forward on doing that in the 2021 year, and because the same information and the same management is happening at the county level for us, they were hoping to incorporate us so that we could develop our IT policy at a fraction of the cost. But again, I'm putting the cart before the horse if I'm going to tell you how much that's going to reduce the cost. I have absolutely no idea at this point. Yeah. I just know that the 16,000 I've proposed is the smaller of the two, because if we have any funds left over, we can then implement further recommendations, finish those testing. The county has also said there's certain aspects of the testing they'll be able to do as part of our contract and not incur additional costs. So 35,000 that was proposed by the MNP, I'm not comfortable placing in the 2021 budget. I just feel that one's a little bit early. I want to make sure you know about it, that I'm not ignoring it. It's definitely there, but it may or may not cost us the dollars in the proposal, because we're not working individually on our own. We're working with a contract with the County of IT, and they're working towards the same end goals as well. And so there's some efficiencies there that we're going to experience.
Okay. Different question, if I may, Scott.
Go ahead.
So I'm just trying to keep a tally here as we're going forward. So we have the addition of the 30,000, and I think it might help with the overall conversation as we continue to go through these departments here and have our final discussion. But as of right now, Kimberly, we got the inclusion or addition of the $30,000 for the renovation for the township office. And I think there was one more addition to the budget thus far. I don't know if you've been keeping a similar tally, but I just think it might help to understand where we're at.
I've got a nice little list that once we get into sort of the summary discussion, I was going to go through it. Yeah,
I'll
not-
be patient. I didn't know
not
if
taking
I was
any-
trying to keep up, but
Not taking
No
any
problem.
wind out of the sails, but I give full credit to Ms. Pope for keeping us on track because she's made us a nice little list that we can go through.
perfect. Excellent. Thank you.
Anything else on this page relative to council discussion or police contract and services? I see the council increase is due to an attributed grid indexing, but there was no promotions that I'm aware of. But that's just the cost of living increase.
Yes, that would only be the 1/10 of 1% that was applied to the grid across the board.
Very good. Okay, next page. Okay, got the library. We can either have the conversation with regards to the library now or wrap it up at the end when we're dealing with all of them. I'm fine either way.
Same.
I'll leave it to the end. Okay. Conservation Authorities, 9.1% increase. Councillor Belch and Councillor Huntley, is there a significant increase in one of yours? Or I'd see it's only 8,000, so I'm guessing it's one of the smaller ones that's going up?
Through you, Chair, I thought there was actually a decrease in the Orca charge this year.
Huh, so we're gonna have to blame this one on Councillor Belch and Councillor Moore for Kawartha and Ganaraska then.
Yeah, I'm not remembering that it was much of an increase at Ganaraska.
Huh, blame the person who's not here. Councillor, or
Yeah.
Ms. Pope, can you help us out here?
I absolutely can help you out here. If you recall, the Otonabee Region Conservation Authority in their budget proposal that was put forward, they have an additional capital levy. I'd have to go back and pull.
All right.
Were attributed $7,233 to pay. That's above and beyond our regular special capital levy that we pay annually and our general operating levy that we pay annually. So perhaps the council member can speak to that 7,000. I can pull the backup documents if you'd like as well.
Councillor Huntley.
Yeah, apologies. I forgot there was a special levy. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what specifically it was for.
Okay, we can come back to it.
There was a decrease in the operating.
We'll pick up that conversation tonight at the evening meeting. I'll give us a chance to go back. I'm just curious what the capital project is, but all good, no worries. We can finish that one off either offline or later on tonight in the later budget meeting. That's fine.
Yeah, it was from the file of Screw Cavan.
Oh, no, we're gonna, next page. Environmental tax. Thank you, Siri Page, for bringing it up. Increase of 71,000. Okay, and Mr. Hancock, just for clarity, the kitchen waste program is being extended out to all of the remaining wards through the pickup at the transfer station and the availability of the containers at the township office for purchase?
Yes, we have the containers available. They typically, if people want them, they are available at the transfer station. And we have put in place 2 Mulluxes that are actually being used quite a bit by the other ward residents. So there is that, and of course, the curbside extension in Millbrook for the kitchen waste.
Okay. Any further questions on that one? If not, next. Water and wastewater. No. Okay, next. And then we're back into capital, so we're good. Any other questions, just sort of finish it off? We've gone through each of the departments' operations. We finished off on the capital. Now, final discussion just in advance of our meeting tonight at 6 o'clock. So if you'll give me the opportunity, I'll go through some of the items that we've discussed. And again, I give full credit to Ms. Pope. She's put together this list for us, and I'll add some verbiage as we go along. And when it comes to opinions, those are mine. It's not advice from Kimberly by any means. So if there's fingers to be pointed, point those at me. She's just provided the numbers. With regards to the general infrastructure reserve, I know that was new and it was intended for the purpose of putting seed funding into the initiation of both the fire hall and the public works projects. And I know council is very supportive of those initiatives, and we're awaiting a report to come back from finance on funding. I would personally like to see that item removed. However, that being said, the funds that would make up that amount, or an amount that we come to an agreed upon tax levy increase, I would like to see those particular funds redirected into the asset replacement as we move towards our goal of trying to achieve a higher percentage of overall depreciation. So I know we're in the high 80s, but it'd be nice if we can get even closer. So anyways, that's sort of my thought on the 300,000 is to pull it, but not to pull it in its entirety. The second items that I would like to deal with are related specifically to the operations of the library. We spoke briefly to it before, and I think that if we're going to try and achieve an operations levy, our index on salaries at the township was 0.1% of an increase based on what their last year's operational expenses were. I think we'd be generous in applying a 1%. If we're going to go for a levy increase for the municipality of a 1%, I think it's a fair offer to put the library at operations off levy at a 1% increase over the 2020, which would take that down from 292,033 to 272,294. And again, that gives them a 1% increase over and above what they had last year. With regards to the municipal office renovations, we have $30,000 that are going in. Kimberly is going to do some research whether there's any opportunity there to pull additional funds from DC. So I will leave that flexibility with her. However, that ultimately the levy will need to be determined, but ultimately the $30,000 funds have to come from somewhere. And the other item that I believe Councillor Huntley pointed out was the $29,000 for the official plan reserve, to be able to pull that out. So without coming out of the levy, but to pull that out of the official plan reserve. So that would be a further reduction. And then the other item deals with the request from the library on their capital purchases of $35,623. In analyzing their reserves that they already have and their use of the reserves last year, I am comfortable with not providing any capital funds this year per the request for $35,623. They will automatically be getting, with council's permission, they will be receiving the DC capital component. And that is, I don't have that number in front of me, but I know that is part of what their capital would be, which would go towards specifically, actually, I do have it in front of me. It goes specifically towards books and DVDs. So it's $29.81 for books and $8.81 for DVDs. So that would go forward because those were monies that were attributed to the library. And if you summarize all of that up, so that's with the removal of the general infrastructure reserve, the removal of the library capital, the adjustment to the operations for the library, the use of the reserves for the official plan, and the addition of the municipal office renovations. If we as a council want to establish a 1% tax increase, then the difference, and this is when I will turn it back to Ms. Pope, the difference I believe would be, I am looking for the number that we'd be putting into the asset replacement.
I can provide that.
Yes, is that the 162,962?
That's correct. And with the changes above, because I'd need to use 191,400 to accommodate the 2% reduction in the rate, and remaining excess funds could go to the asset replacement reserve.
And with that, that would give us 1.933943 into our asset replacement fund for this year, which would bring us up to 93% of our depreciation for the year, which is absolutely incredible. I'm actually quite impressed. So those would be my suggestions, and I know Kimberly can certainly speak to those items. She made a list highlighting the different ones, but I do want to leave her with the flexibility of the transfer specifically back to the asset replacement, because it's dependent upon some of the outcomes of those decisions relative to finding monies in DCs for some of those other items. So I open the floor up for discussion at this point. Deputy Mayor Graham?
Yeah, no, I fully support. I think I fully support the majority of that. I'm still scribbling on my little notepad to get it all done. But you know, I agree that it's, you know, this is one of those unique years before we have the impact of the new community center impacting the asset replacement reserve. It's, you know, there's no time like the present to get as far ahead as we can to sort of lessen the blow that next year is going to be. You know, the reality is with the inclusion of that huge an asset, we're going to be back in the probably low 80s, I would estimate, or if even the 80s from an asset replacement reserve. So, you know, I fully support any of the dollars that we generate from the levy this year being directed to that, because it's specifically going to lessen the burden next year. And I think whether it's a 1 or a 1.2%, you know, levy impact, whatever that number turns out to be in the end, that's a proportionate and considerate levy, in my opinion, based on the struggles that all of our residents and the general population are going under. I think it's above and beyond what I had hoped to achieve. So I commend you for that work to come up with that number. But I think it's I mean, there's still one more meeting, so we'll see what some of the outstanding answers are. But yeah, no, I'm in fully support of that.
Very good. Councillor Belch or Councillor Huntley? Councillor Belch, go ahead.
Yep, through you, Mayor, just something that I just wanted to be clear on, and we'll look to either Kimberly or actually our CAO. Is the library board, are they allowed to, you know, do we see that that they're allowed to ask for monies from a capital standpoint, and then they just keep building up their capital reserves so that they can use it for something other than what we had originally given to them?
I can see Ms. Hurley and Ms. Pope running quickly to answer that question.
Yes.
I will answer a portion of it because I think I would like to have the CAO respond officially. But generally speaking, the municipality, when we have had any type of a surplus, we roll it forward so that we're not charging the municipal tax again against the ratepayer. So if we haven't done a project or we haven't done something, it's going back to the reserve, or the surplus is being funded and rolled forward into the operating, so that we're not asking for those dollars again when we didn't even do that project. That would be the best practices for fiscal management, and not duplicating any type of a charge for the residential taxpayer. However, we do know that some projects come in under budget, and so there's sometimes a realized savings, maybe perhaps that they've been able to retain. And other times projects perhaps maybe haven't gone forward. So this is a place where I'll just leave it with the CAO for further clarification.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Belch, Ms. Pope is correct. But at the same time, it is their board. They have the right under the Library Act to make these fiscal decisions. Under ours, for our municipality, it's our responsibility to determine the actual funds that you wish to give, but how they spend them and how they are definitely fiscally responsible, but it's how they spend their monies is really a direction of their board. So the municipality does not dictate that.
So the quick question then is, if they've set aside monies that we think that we're giving to them for things like furniture and IT, and they don't to spend it, it feels like to me that they're being dishonest.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, through Councillor Belch, that's not a comment that I'm personally in a position to make, but that is a question that you, Councillor Belch, could certainly ask them tonight at 6 o'clock when they're back on.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. So back to Ms. Pope. Has council captured enough with regards to what those suggestions are? And the next one is over to Madam Clerk to simplify it. Do you want each of these items in a specific motion so that the essence doesn't get lost, or how do you want to capture this?
Mr. Mayor, I think I've captured the items as you spoke about. I think we can put this all in one motion as we're doing it all at once. I definitely would seek the assistance of Ms. Pope to get the numbers accurate to ensure that your motion is exactly what you're looking for.
Very good. I could rhyme off the numbers. The only part that I wouldn't have is obviously to include with the library is the accounting, the audit component. Obviously that's included in. It's not part of the library operations levy, but it is in a sense included. And the other part is those DCs as well. But outside of that, I've got all the other numbers in front. Ms. Pope, how do you want to capture? Because I know you've got the numbers in front of you. What I want to provide you with that remaining flexibility so the final tax implication on the levy is 1%.
Alana, if you'd like to go forward, I don't know if you want to start with maybe reading to me what you have, or the opposite side is I can read you what I have and we can move forward. Which way would you prefer?
Why don't we go with you, Ms. Pope? You've got the numbers in front of you. Alana can write them down, and then if she's missing any parts, you can fill it in.
Okay, so just as a summary, council has requested to reduce the tax rate increase to 1% and to remove the general infrastructure reserve of $300,000, to remove the library capital of $35,623, to adjust the library operating levy request from the initial $292,033 to a revised $272,294 to reflect a 1% increase, to use reserves if possible for the official plan. And because I can't confirm the number at this point, we have to look at that, but it's in the budget for 29,000, but to use the reserves for the official plan, and to add the cost required for the municipal office renovations, and to look to see if there are any DCs or additional reserves to cover those costs. And any remaining funds would be transferred to the asset replacement reserve to fund future infrastructure projects.
To bring the tax levy to 1%.
Yeah, I started with that, but yes, absolutely.
Perfect. And does there need to be anything specific in there with the inclusion of the specific DCs for the library?
It's already in the budget and you're not asking to remove it. So I left it there. Same with all of the allocated IT, payroll, audit. They're all still in there and there's no mention in these numbers here to remove it. So I'll just refer to the clerk, but I think they're okay.
If you're comfortable with it, that's sufficient for me.
Very good. Excellent. Any other questions then from members of council on that? That is a motion. Do we have a mover? Deputy Mayor Graham, seconder? Seconder. Okay, Councillor Huntley. Okay. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham.
Yes.
Councillor Belch.
Yes.
Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion is approved. Excellent. Very good.
Quick
Ms.
question.
Go ahead, Councillor Belch.
Well, just if I was to bring up before the library board, I'm not impressed with how they've kind of squirreled away or hidden, extra money, if you will, into their budget by not enacting, basically that we gave them money for things to be bought and they've just chosen not to use it. How does everybody else feel about that? Because I'm kind of ticked off.
Well, I think it's a question, as Yvette said, I'm pretty sure it's a question that you can ask, certainly ask them tonight.
Right.
Absolutely. It's a fair question. Okay. So we've got that. Ms. Pope, am I missing anything else? We've passed a motion. You've got direction on a specific tax implication. You've been given the flexibility in order to get it there. Is there anything further relative to your report? I guess we probably should have a motion to receive your report after all that hard work.
Thank you. I believe recommendation number 2, I don't know if you want to await the meeting tonight to approve with the 1% change that you've amended to as per discussed, or if you want to do that at this time. It's up to you, but the recommendation number 1, you can receive it, but number 2, we'd want to change that to 1% when you're prepared to approve that.
Okay, well, it's still a draft budget at this point. We are asking you to bring back any changes that you can do with that to demonstrate that 1%. So I think it would be prudent for us to pass that. It's still obviously open for discussion because we've got a public budget meeting tonight, but that is the direction at this point. So I would ask then to receive the budget presentation and support the recommendations with the modification to be 1% on the second item.
That's
Mover. We got Deputy Mayor Graham and Councillor Huntley. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, in the original motion that we just discussed, you do have staff direction to reduce the tax rate to 1%. You can.
Yeah, we wanted to do that twice just to make sure.
Just for clarification, I think you can probably just receive this one.
Okay, motion to receive. Is that okay, that amendment to Deputy Mayor Graham and Councillor Huntley? We're good.
Last call on the $5,000 for the marketing fund.
All right, quickly, Madam Clerk, we got a recorded vote before we change our minds.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion has passed. Okay, now we are on to the next item, which is lost my agenda. Oh, we've got it. Thank you, Siri Page. We are good. Confirming bylaw, being bylaw number 2021-02, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the meeting held January 21st, 2021. You just moved the page I was reading. You got me back. Good for you. Well done. Be read a first, second, third time signed by the mayor and the clerk and the corporate seal attached thereto. Moved by Deputy Mayor Graham and Councillor Belch. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion is approved. Motion to adjourn. We have Councillor Belch and Councillor Huntley. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion is approved. We are adjourned. We will see everybody in a couple hours.